This is the complete full version of Paradise Lost. I had uploaded it in parts, but I had never gotten around to uploading the full version, entire video as I had recorded it. But I thought it might be kind of timely now since we've been talking in the last video about Epstein and the tunnels and fires and things like that. And since I already had this one done and sitting in the files, I'm going to go ahead and upload this now while I'm finishing up the one that we were working on with the dimensions and the clouds and the orbs and programmable matter and water memory and all of that type of stuff. Just a super quick update. The billboard is up. They installed it yesterday. So that's number 2, one in South America, and then this one on the way to Chicago, St. Louis, Memphis on Interstates 5770. And we are nowhere close to done. In fact, we have just started. I also wanted to tell you that the hats are in. They approved all the hat designs. To get the hats added to the Teespring thing, you had to unlock a certain level and do all this stuff. Well, they're here now. So we've got the beanies and then several styles of caps. And then if you click on the caps, then you can see inside of each of those listings will be different styles and different colors. Like here's the red one. I thought that's kind of funny because nowadays any red hat with white lettering is going to get people to look, right? But you'll have to surf around through all of the different styles because I don't know why they grouped them the way they did, but there's navy in there, there's white caps, even on the beanies, there's different colors. I think there's gray, some different colors. Anyway, so that's it on the hats. I just wanted to throw that in because several of you down in the comments section, as you can see, have actually asked for them, which thank you. Thank you so much for even wanting to participate in this movement. And we're doing it. We are the walking billboards. They can ban the 10 Commandments. They can ban the name of Jesus from public spaces. They can ban nativity scenes. They can ban the Bible from public education, but they can't rip the clothes off our back. We are the billboards. So thank you for everybody who is taking part in getting Jesus trending again. I love you guys. So here we go. This is the complete full version of the Paradise Lost video. It's well over 3 hours. It's about 3.5 hours. And I had never posted the full version before. I had only posted episodes. So here it is. Hi, everybody. I'm back. And I want to kind of pick up where I left off in the Black Awakening series when I was talking about all of the daycares and the Black Forest in Germany and that type of thing, and all of these fires, destroying evidence everywhere. So I want to take it to the next level and go into the California wildfires, particularly the one in Paradise. And I have to warn you up front, this video is not going to be for everybody because I'm going to go into a lot of really fringy stuff once I get into this. So it isn't going to be just the typical directed energy, Agenda 21, that type of stuff. Although all of those are puzzle pieces that'll play into this, there's some really fringy stuff that whether you agree with it or not, it's definitely worth discussing. And as always, this isn't just going to cover one topic like the California wildfires. This is going to tie into the mystery booms that people have been hearing for years and years now. It's going to tie into the underground tunnel systems. It's going to tie into so much besides the California wildfires. It's even going to tie into David Paulides' Missing 411 series about the phenomena of missing people in the national parks, and just so much more. So let's just jump into it and get started by rehashing some of these mysterious fires that we've seen throughout history and how they're connected, and then we'll lead into the California wildfires. Of course, Epstein Island. After he gets arrested as registered sex offender with, the Lolita Express and all of the stuff, yeah, there's a major earthquake and it all just burns down. And again, earthquakes are another symptom of these directed energy or these frequency weapons. So there's that. And then, of course, there was the fire at Hillary and Bill Clinton's house in New York. And we know that she had her private server and all of that when she was Secretary of State. It's just hilarious that they're prosecuting people over hush money to some prostitute or something. And the Secretary of State of the United States of America, instead of using the official channels, has a secret server where yeah, you got to have your own server to send emails about your daughter's wedding. Really? And then she hires some high-tech firm to completely wipe it in ways that aren't even available to the regular public. Now, why would you do something like that to hide emails about your daughter's wedding? I mean, it's just so ludicrous, the stuff they expect us to believe. But anyway, obviously, they are always covering up evidence of their crimes. And of course, they had a big house fire on January of 2018. Of course, all of us who watch more than just CNN and the Oscars, we've been aware forever that the Clintons are neck deep in this human trafficking ring. And again, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's a fact that Laura Silsby, who was connected to the Clinton Foundation, who was setting up this humanitarian effort in Haiti, was caught at the border and arrested with 33 children she had kidnapped. And she was trying to say they were orphans and all of that, but their parents were still alive. She was convicted. This isn't just a charge without due process. She was convicted. Her sentence and charges were reduced after an intervention by Bill Clinton. And we saw the same types of things happen in the UK when Seville and others connected to the royal family were under investigation. The investigators, the police actually said that a member, in their press release, that a member of the royal family had spoken on behalf of Seville and stuff like that. So these people are interfering with investigations, arrests, charges of these human traffickers. Now, why would that happen? And they have such a huge network, they have to have their own server? Their own server? So a lot of people wrongly think that the whole, Pedogate scandal started with the WikiLeaks emails between Podesta and Clinton and all of that. But that's not true. It actually started with these international human trafficking busts. That's when people started noticing the connections between these quote unquote humanitarian efforts and orphanages and that type of thing, and all of these politicians and celebrities. Even Oprah Winfrey, remember she opened that orphanage and the school for girls in Africa, and then they had all of those sex abuse scandals that the staff was raping the children. Right here, this is ABC News. This isn't some conspiracy channel. ABC News. Cops probe body of dead newborn found at Oprah Winfrey's school. Of course, you want to find this now. Good luck finding this article, because if you type in, like I just typed in, Oprah Winfrey orphanage sexual abuse, you'll go through 600 pages of stuff about Michael Jackson and people she's had on her show, but not one single article about what happened at her school for girls. You really have to dig. They're controlling the search engines really deep now. But the point is, this stuff does go on. It's a fact. It's not a conspiracy theory. People are getting convicted. We have the court documents. It is real. And there is an organized effort destroying the evidence and the servers being wiped and stuff being done by the politicians, but the media are complicit in covering it up and perpetuating that propaganda that, oh, it's just some emails about her daughter's wedding. Yeah, okay. And this cover up has been going on a long time. We talked about General Michael Aquino, who was a psychological operations officer in the United States military, who was implicated in all of the child abuse scandals and satanic rituals. He's also the founder of the Satanist Church of Set, or Temple of Set. So it's not a conspiracy theory. He's the founder of a satanic cult called the Temple of Set. But anyway, he was implicated in all of these child abuse cases in daycares, particularly at the Presidio out in California. And the children said that they were being taken out through tunnels underneath to a building next door and taken and being used at all these different locations and things like that. So what happens? The building next to the Presidio daycare burns down, completely burns down. And then Coincidence of all coincidences, right? Later on in the investigation, the daycare itself completely burns down. Not they burned down at the same time, one caught fire from the other or something. No, two completely different instances, both buildings in this investigation just happened to burn down. I mean, at some point, you'd think that we would get tired of the same old excuses and people would start to wake up, but this has been a lot of years and people are still in denial. But the McMartin preschool, that was another one. And of course, what happened? The McMartin daycare or preschool caught on fire and burned down. Out in California, again, back in the 80s, it was the preschools. Now it's if you were following the Q stuff back last year, you know that we did a lot of research into, now it's the modeling agencies, these child modeling agencies that they use, and even the child protective services, quote unquote, protective services, that there are massive amounts of children that go missing in the foster care system.
Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Mike Maruso.
And I'm Maria Nanali. State lawmakers are now questioning how 70 foster kids can go missing.
The report coming to light after a lawmaker confronted the agency about the missing kids yesterday. Now our investigative team is pressing leaders.
41 Action News investigator Jessica McMaster is taking a deeper look at how these children are actually tracked by the state. Jessica.
Yeah, Rhiannon, Department for Children and Families has contractors that place children in the state of Kansas with foster care parents, so DCF doesn't handle these cases directly. We did speak with one of those contractors, KVC Health Systems, about why and how these children are going missing after being placed into foster care. Director of Communication Jenny Cutts tells us most of the children who've gone missing are runaways. And I do want to point out each state is required to report the number of missing foster care children to National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. KVC says the number of children missing from foster care in the state of Kansas is on average with the rest of the nation.
So see how they do that? They're forced, the mainstream media is forced to do coverage on a lot of these issues from public pressure because people are waking up and they see what's going on and they're like, where are all of these hundreds of thousands of children going? And the mainstream media make you think they're doing this investigative report on it. And how do they close? Oh, well, here we have a representative from there and they say that they're all runaways. And then, by the way, this isn't a strange number of missing children. This is on par for the rest of the nation. End of story. Yeah, well, it shouldn't be on par for the rest of the nation that tens of thousands of children, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people are going missing and are never found. Saying that all of these children are disappearing out of government control, the government, these children become wards of the state. The government is responsible for them at that point, and then they'd all just disappear. Just to say, oh, it's on par for the rest of the nation is not an answer. That should make it more urgent that it isn't an anomaly just in Kansas. It's happening all across the United States of America. When these children go into the control of the government, they disappear. And I've done tons of videos on that in the past. You probably have to go a year or two back in my playlists to find them, but about hundreds of thousands of missing children and missing homeless people. The people are just like, they get an answer from the mainstream. Oh, they just ran away. And they're like, okay, they just stopped looking into it. But it's no coincidence that all of the SRA survivors, the satanic ritual abuse survivors, like this lady, Teal Swan, they speak openly about that being one of the ways that they get children who they say won't be missed.
Animals is what they did like on your average holiday, but on the big ones, which they call black masses, which these covens of like 13 usually, because they believe in 13 silver moons in a year, there's 13 full moons, so it's usually 13 members of a satanic coven. They'll get together with other covens in the area for these big black masses, they call them. When I got older, I found out how they actually found these children. When I was younger, they would use me and other kids who were part of the groups to entice these children into the car. So they case the neighborhoods for kids that are not being watched. Their number one favorite group is children who are part of the foster care system, because they find out these kids, they know exactly where they're walking to and from school, and then when they take them, this is where it gets really super messed up. They, oh, well, I don't know, they ran away or something. So, I mean, if you look up at the statistics of the amount of like runaway missing children that there are in this country, it's gonna blow your mind. The fact that the country is like, wow, how does anybody not notice? I'm like, I don't know, how does that many thousands, hundreds of thousands of children go missing every year and nobody knows?
So the point is, they've changed their MO. This thing almost blew wide open back in the 1980s, but they were able to do damage control and hit hard propaganda called satanic panic. And they hired and brought forth all of these psychologists and put them on all the, Oprah Winfrey Show, Geraldo Rivera, and like the Larry King nighttime shows and stuff. And they were able to do damage control and convince everybody that these thousands upon thousands upon thousands of children that were coming forward talking about this network, that those were all just memories that their therapists planted in their heads and stuff like that, despite all of the medical evidence that, they had STDs, 4-year-olds with STDs and all that sort of stuff. But my point is that they changed their MOs. So this is what we see now, all of these humanitarian groups and the foster care abductions and cover-ups and these modeling agencies. This is that snapshot from Ray Chandler's Instagram. I mean, you can see this is her actual account, Rachel Chandler, and she's advertising. Does this look like something from a modeling agency? She says, "Happy to announce Midland Agency, Casting and Management by Walter Pierce and I, introducing Guy Cartier." So this is a little boy that she's advertising on Instagram as part of this quote unquote casting agency. And you can see regular people that aren't in the cult who came across it on Instagram are like, "Poor kid, looks like he needs saving." And another guy says, "That's what I'm saying. What the hell is this about?" So any normal person can look at this and say, hey, this is not a modeling agency or a casting agency. And this is a little boy, and you can see how they've kept his hair and the jewelry with this androgynous, kind of posting him as a girl or a boy. He's covered in hickeys and stuff. So this is how open they were about it before this thing started to come unraveled for them. You can see this post is from September 5th of 2016. So this is right before Donald Trump took office. And make no mistake, look at this. The people who thought this was normal, they all gave the 666 okay hand sign. They didn't leave a comment. They were just like, did the Satanist, okay 666 hand sign. Both of these people. So we traced this, and I did a video. I don't know if I posted it or I think they might have taken it down. I can't remember, but I did one on Rachel Chandler, and yeah, traced her through these children being used. Art studios was another. There were a couple of these elitist artists that did this really edgy work with children in masks walking through fields and water up to their waist. I can't remember, but what I did was I just went through Rachel Chandler's friend list and I just checked them all out to see who these people were. And yeah, so you can just follow it and follow it and follow the leads and see that who these people are. So it's easy to see going back. You go back a few more years, all the way back to 2013. And you can see that here's Rachel Chandler again, talking to the same people who are involved with Teen Vogue magazine and shooting Hillary Clinton's photo shoots. I mean, you can see all you got to do is trace the names and you can see they're all connected. This is Rachel Chandler right here when she was a younger girl with Bill Clinton, a picture taken on Epstein's plane, the Lolita Express. I mean, it doesn't get any clearer than this. If I, as a citizen journalist, can find all of these connections so easily just by going through people's social media accounts, then where's the FBI? Are there sealed indictments? I mean, this was practically out in the open, right in front of our faces, under our noses for a long, long time. And like I said, the horrific thing is that we almost took this cabal down back in the 1980s. Back with the stuff I talked about with Michael Aquino, they were able to trace those child sex abuse cases through all of the military. It wasn't just the Presidio daycare. It was daycares in West Germany, daycares on military bases all across the United States. I mean, these children were coming forward by the thousands upon thousands upon thousands. But the difference was back in the 1980s, there was no internet. There were no computers. People didn't have home computers. Seriously, I know that's hard for young people to imagine. But when I was in grade school, computers did not exist. I remember them teaching us about them in our social studies book. I'll never forget it. I remember reading about these things called computers, and it said in the textbook, it taught us that these computers were too bulky and too expensive and would never be for personal use. And it had a little picture of them saying the government had these, and they looked like bigger than the D-Wave quantum computer, only they were like cream colored. So it had a room that looked like it was just full of these giant filing cabinet things that they told us were computers. But my point is that all of this was able to be kept secret because there weren't any social media accounts and they weren't using social media, and society wasn't so depraved. I mean, now it's perverse. Look around, a sexually deviant, awful, perverse sewer of filth. That's why it always cracks me up. It does. It just makes me chuckle when these arrogant, dumbed down atheists and agnostics say things like, they attack me and say, "Oh, how can you believe in an invisible God? Oh yeah, well, how come you can't see him? It's like the invisible flying spaghetti monster in the sky, ha ha ha," because they've been indoctrinated through schools, through public schools, the same school system that taught me there was no such thing as invisible wireless technology. The same school system that taught me that cell phones could never exist because, hey, that's invisible frequencies. How could that carry information? Oh, no, Yeah, when I came up, there were no cell phones. There was no Wi-Fi, wireless technology. There were no microwaves. So that's as stupid. I just chuckle at these atheists who say, oh, invisible God is such a concept. They can't even wrap their mind around it. But yet for older people like me, I've lived through it. I've lived through the nonsense that they called quote unquote science and seen that they were completely ignorant of how big reality is and how things actually work with the invisible realm and frequencies back then. So I lived in a time when there were no microwave ovens. So an atheist might say something like, "Oh, that's impossible that you could cook an object with just invisible air. There's no fire there. I don't see any fire. You're delusional." And now we know that obviously a microwave, an invisible microwave frequency, can cook an object a million times faster than a visible flame. So visible is not the boundary of reality. So it just makes me chuckle when these dumbed down atheists that they're churning out of the public quote unquote education, indoctrination system, come at me with this silliness about an invisible God. It's like, really? That's the end of your reality is visible? So I guess you don't use cell phones or microwave ovens or anything. It's just ridiculous. Their arguments are ridiculous. They're small-minded and shallow, and yet they are so arrogant that they think they have the intellectual high ground. But I'm getting off on a tangent. The point is that now we have access to lots of information and we can see that the mainstream narrative isn't always the truth. But last time this cabal, this Satanist cabal began to be exposed and people started to rise up and admit this was really happening, we didn't have access to the internet to hear anything besides what the mainstream media gave us. Even the interviews with the victims and the psychologists and stuff were of the choosing of the mainstream propaganda. That we only had what they showed us. I think people don't realize that back in the 1980s, we didn't have thousands of channels. It wasn't just the internet, but just the television. We just had a handful, 3, 5 channels maybe. So they controlled all of the information, which made it so easy to manipulate and control people who started to wake up. They just showed them all these shill psychologists that were like, "Oh no, these are all just false memories. These kids are all liars," and all of that sort of thing. And they were able to convince people. You have to keep in mind that even channels like Fox News, whether you think it's controlled opposition or whatever, it didn't even exist until 1996, so there was no opposition. And I know that's hard to imagine in the information age that we live in now, especially for young people. But yeah, the last time this awakening started to happen, they were so easily able to quell it because the entire world, especially the United States, and we were technologically advanced, compared to most countries. But yeah, in the United States, we literally just had a handful of channels. So people believed it. If you saw it on Larry King Live or Oprah Winfrey or the mainstream news channels, ABC, CBS, NBC, that's the only way you could get information. In fact, I was talking in the comments section with a gal the other day, talking about how we used to have to do it when we researched this stuff back in the 90s. And you would have to mail order to get VHS tapes. There was like an underground network to get information out that the mainstream wouldn't show you, like after the Oklahoma City bombing during Clinton's administration, where Janet Reno, hey, that's not a transgender. No, Anyway, where she came out and started demonizing conservatives. They used the Timothy McVeigh incident that they themselves had set up to say, see what these right wingers, they're the terrorists. They're the ones we should be hating, all of that sort of thing. So it wasn't the Obama administration and Janet Napolitano and everybody who started that movement. They've been working on that for decades and decades to demonize us so that, they can criminalize us. That's the whole Antichrist agenda. That's exactly the way Hitler did it in Nazi Germany. Oh, remember the Reichstag fire, the attack on the German parliament building? The term Reichstag fire has come to refer to false flag actions facilitated by an authority to promote their own interests through popular approval of retribution or retraction of civil rights. So they burned down their own building so they could blame it on somebody else. Sound familiar? Right after, like 4 weeks after Hitler got sworn in, and they said, oh, well, there's the evidence that our political opposition are these terrible terrorists. So now we get to retract all of the civil rights. And so they used that as an excuse for the purge, a literal purge called the Night of the Long Knives, where they went out and they massacred between 700 and 1,000 people, and thousands more of their perceived opponents were arrested and rounded up. So it was never just about the Jewish religion or anything of that nature. This was about rounding up political dissidents. Now, doesn't that sound a lot like what I talked about in that series I just put up called The Black Awakening? That there will be at some point, there will be a Night of the Long Knives where, boom, they launch it and they go and they round up the political dissidents, and, lots of people were executed in the dreams and visions that I put in there. That's exactly what people report, that they've been shown by the Lord is coming. And it's not beyond comprehension because it's already happened in history more than once. And although this purge, that's the words they actually used, this purge of political dissidents has already begun in America. No, they haven't rounded us up yet. They've got the FEMA camps ready. Everything's ready. But you can see on social media, this purge, they're taking down political dissidents, not because we've done anything wrong or we're criminals, just because they don't want any freedom of speech that disagrees with the official narrative. So whether it's, any of these mass events that are happening, or whether it's just election time and we want to expose the crime syndicate, it doesn't matter. If you say anything that is not leftist or liberal, there's a chance they'll take your channel down. I mean, they've completely demonetized my channel, not my videos. They said I'm ineligible, like the old civil rights movement with the white drinking fountains and black drinking fountains. They've literally said I'm not allowed to drink out of their fountain. It's open discrimination. It's open prejudice against an entire people group. And look, nobody in America cares. Yeah, we're having these congressional hearings, but nothing changes. Just this past week, again, Project Veritas, they got the inside goods on Facebook and the social media. Insiders who actually worked at Facebook turning over the documents and the screenshots of their internal communications, talking about targeting dissidents and showing the troll codes that they put on us, that they have an actual system to target individuals in this tyrannical Nazi style cyber book burning where they are going to purge the internet of dissidents. History is repeating itself right in front of our eyes, and yet people watch this as if it's entertainment, and they're doing nothing. Where is the conscience of the people who are working in all of these social media sites? There shouldn't be one whistleblower turning over documents. There should be hundreds and thousands of young people who you can't identify, you can't reason and logic and identify that you are targeting an entire people group. I mean, this is a call to action. Not everybody who works in these cubicles in these industries are in the cabal. And if you're not, and you're seeing this stuff, you have a duty to humanity to report these crimes against humanity. And if you don't, silence is consent. It's that simple. The Nazis at the Nuremberg trials, every single one of them pled the same thing. They said, we were just following orders. Well, we were just following orders, as if that's some excuse to commit crimes against humanity. It doesn't matter. If these giant social media giants are forcing you at your job to take part in launching this tyrannical regime, you need to come out and do something, because you will have to answer to it. There wasn't an excuse at the Nuremberg trials. The people who went to those tribunals when this was all exposed, they paid with their lives. They were found guilty. Just doing what they were told was not an excuse to facilitate the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime. In fact, it was mostly just the lower level guys who paid. The higher ups, the higher Nazis, all escaped through the rat lines. It was all the people, like you people working in these cubicles, doing the dirty work to target conservatives and Christians and do this purge for them. Yeah, when the tribunals came last time, World War II, it was the lower level guys. They're the ones who went to the tribunals and were found guilty. So if you think all of these big CEOs and all of these heads of all of these giant social media giants in Silicon Valley are going to come to your rescue when this thing is exposed, they'll throw you under the bus the first chance they get. They have people in place. They have networks of attorneys and cover-ups and police officers and corrupt judges and politicians and lobbyists. They have people in place to protect them, but they're not going to care about you. The people who they actually charged with doing the dirty work and censoring us and purging us.
Mentioned a video by Lauren Chen, formerly known as Roaming Millennial, and said that her video on social justice warriors was destructive behavior. It was in a presentation given to the moderators in order to teach them how to further suppress content. The document reads, yes, their meme content is seriously bad, but let's examine troll behavior more broadly. Trolls are involved in many destructive behaviors on Facebook, including toxic meme creation, black propaganda, and red-pilling normies to convert them to their worldview. And then they include the example video, which is Lauren Chen's. Lauren Chen is like the nicest, sweetest conservative you'll ever see, and Facebook calls her a destructive troll for trying to convert people to her worldview.
Good grief. Does anybody else see the irony here? That they're using the bogus excuse that it's like cyberbullying or hate speech to explain your worldview if you don't agree with them. Yet they are the biggest bullies. They're not just saying they disagree with people or saying their worldview. They are physically harming. They're trying to take people's jobs, take people's incomes, make them homeless and poor. You know, they are cyberbullying, like actually bullying, not just saying things that offend people. They're actually writing programs, writing computer code, putting tags on you, deboosting you, taking your income so you can't feed your children or pay your rent. They're beyond cyberbullying. They're actually causing physical harm to people that they disagree with. They are the biggest cyber bullies, real bullying, not just BS excuses like they use. It's not bullying to have a difference of opinion or to speak of your own worldview if you disagree with the mainstream worldview. That's not bullying, but it is literal bullying when you target people's income and try to get them fired from their jobs, try to take their life's work down, try to cause harm to them and their families financially, to their reputations. Cyberbullying, like name calling, calling this poor girl a troll, a destructive troll. I mean, they're the bullies. The irony, the hypocrisy, it's unbelievable.
Lauren, now that you're not just some independent YouTuber and you're working for the Blaze, which I will withhold my comments on for now, you need to sue Facebook for defamation. James O'Keefe personally met with and interviewed the source of the documents, and then went out and found and confronted the Facebook employee who was responsible for writing the report.
We asked Yamamoto about the insider actually seeing a troll score under the fake account index in CRT, Facebook's back-end content review tool.
You actually created this report, did you not? I don't actually have any comment on any of this.
Yamamoto issued a no-comment comment and fled the scene.
He then confronted face-to-face the Facebook engineer who literally wrote the code to deboost people's live streams.
We'd like to talk to you about why this code shows up on all of these pages. And I can give these to you. Yeah. Any other comment?
You're James O'Keefe?
I'm James O'Keefe, yes. Okay. Well, not much luck in talking to Mr. Ben David.
Go to ProjectVeritas.com or their YouTube channel to watch the entire 20-minute investigation. Oh, by the way, 2 months ago, Franklin Graham, son of Billy Graham, was suspended from Facebook for posting hate speech for something that he had posted something like 2 years earlier after their AI, which is getting more sophisticated every day, started combing through old posts and decided that calling the radical LGBT activists sinners was hateful. They took the post down and locked him out of his account for... I mean, what's next? Are they gonna ban you for posting the Declaration of Independence? Oh wait, what's this? Facebook censors America's Declaration of Independence for hate speech? This is a true story, by the way. It actually happened. A small newspaper in Texas posted the Declaration of Independence just days before the 4th of July to celebrate Independence Day, and it was taken down for hate speech.
So they're stuck in sort of a quagmire. They need this social media. They need the Internet of Things. This is all part of what they're using in their surveillance society and their control network and their propaganda network and their brainwashing and MK Ultra programming. So they need the social media networks. They need humans to make it go viral. That's what they need, to spread their disease like a virus, to spread their perversion and their depravity like a virus. They have to have humans to do that, to make it go viral, because they tried broadcasting it on TV. Look at the ratings. I mean, TV is almost obsolete. Many of the newspapers have already gone bankrupt and had to restructure and basically are just existing as online newspapers because people don't get their news from a paper newspaper that gets delivered in their little box every day. Their TV isn't working. It's just not working anymore. Nobody's watching it. They broadcast their propaganda 24 hours a day. I mean, CNN is round the clock. It broadcasts 24 hours a day. It's just their ratings are low. Nobody watches it. So this is what they do. They need the social media networks. They need us to make it viral. And they pulled out all of the stops. It's all hardcore, non-stop leftist propaganda at this point. Everything. If you watch the Oscars or the Grammys, these award ceremonies, what is it? Is it about art and music? Is it really? Because when I watch it, it's just one speech after another of political propaganda. They just take turns. They just get up here and pat themselves on the back. You're so awesome. No, you're awesome. No, you are. No, you're awesome. And they get up there and take turns telling us, condescending us, how they're so much smarter than us and this is how you should think. That's what it is. It might as well be the Democratic National Convention. I mean, really, they get up there and give speech after speech after speech after speech just about politics, leftist politics. And not just politics, all of their leftist liberal agendas, all of them, the social engineering to bring us into their satanic cult, their culture. So they've completely maximized their efforts. It's all, there's no such thing as comedians. There's no such thing as award shows. There's no such thing as TV or movies for entertainment. It's all propaganda. At this point, it is all propaganda. Think about it. What comedian is not about political propaganda for the leftists? Saturday Night Live, that's all they do. That's all they do, because they put it in the context of, oh, well, this is comedy. So they're feeding the masses, brainwashing the masses. People are tuning into Saturday Night Live just because they want to laugh on a Saturday night. But what do they get? Programmed. It's programming. They turn into, who is it? Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert. I mean, really? Are you that blind? You can't see? This isn't just comedy. This is leftist political programming. All of it. Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, all they do is preach leftist propaganda because they make you chuckle when they do it. People receive it. In fact, a lot of people, that's where they get their news. The younger people, they don't watch CNN or anything. They think they're getting news from Stephen Colbert or Saturday Night Live. And really they are, because it's the same exact thing they're saying on CNN. It's just they put it in a different format. So, I mean, you can see why it works, because it's intense. You try to watch the Oscars, what do you get? Political speeches. You try to watch Saturday Night Live, what do you get? Political programming. You try to watch Stephen Colbert, what do you get? Political programming. I mean, you can see, try to go to a Hollywood movie, it's got a message, you know. So, I mean, you can see why it's so effective. So we're the last bastion. We're the last bastion here on the internet, on social media, people exercising their freedom of speech and having a dissenting voice. And they can't stand it. They can't take the whole internet down because they need it for their control network. So they're trying to take us out systematically, and they're doing it. You guys know it. How many channels you know? We all go through the same thing. Oh, my channel gets taken down. Oh, I got demonetized. Oh, I got, you know, it's just cyberbullying nonstop from these people. And it's not just taking us down. It's like we talked about the Facebook thing. They're writing the computer code and the algorithms to disappear us. Shadow banning. So let's do Waco. Let's just check Waco Siege. We'll type it in right here in front of you and we'll see. Waco Siege. Oh gosh, that's weird. It's all mainstream. History Channel. We got History Channel, CNN, CBS, CBS Evening News, ABC News, The New York Times, Today Show, CNN, ABC News, 48 Hours, National Geographic, Associated Press, PBS, Today Show, CNN, PBS. So you get my point. Used to, a couple of years ago, you could type in anything like Waco Siege, and all of these documentaries that citizen journalists like myself put up would come up in the search engines. But now this is just TV. They're taking the U out of YouTube, and they're just making this another cable network that you won't be able to find anything except what they sanction. It's not a conspiracy theory, and Project Veritas didn't have to expose it. Everybody knows it. Just type something in the search engine and see. If you are not in their network, they are disappearing you. They are making you a non-person. They are censoring you. This is Nazi Germany. It's already here. They just have to be subtle, like the snakes that they are. They have to be subtle doing it to prevent the revolution, to prevent the uprising, so that we feel like, oh, it's not already here, even though you can type it in the search engine and see that none of us show up anymore. Only these people show up. Like I said, I've done searches where I literally typed in every word of the title of a video and the channel name, looking for a video, and it won't show up in the search engine. Word for word, the exact title and the channel name, word for word, cut and paste to do a test, and it would not pull up in the search engine. It's just blocked, shadow banned. And you guys know, because I get hundreds and hundreds of emails and messages a month saying, well, they unsubscribed me from you. I had to like this video 4 times because I kept liking it, they kept erasing it. Well, I thought you hadn't posted anything in 6 months because I stopped getting notifications. Just like Project Veritas just showed you, they have people working day and night writing computer code to disappear us, to erase all dissenting voices. And we're aware of it because we're in a community that still talks about it. But most people, when they type in something and all that comes up is all of these mainstream sources from the same exact cabal, they don't think twice. They just click on the video they want. They're like, oh yeah, there's one, History Channel, what happened? And they're like, okay, well, that's what happened. But it's probably not at all what happened. I mean, you see, when they will ban the Declaration of Independence, whether you agree with it or not, it's an historical document. They're saying that we can't discuss world history. It's an actual historical document that they won't let us post and have a discussion about. Even if you're a communist, atheist, Satanist, whatever, it doesn't change the fact that that's a historical document. But that's the degree of censorship that we live in. Not tomorrow, not it's coming, not after the Black Awakening, right now. They're doing this to us right now. And make no mistake, they're not content at just censoring us. They want to incite violence against us. And it's working. It's happening. Conservatives and Christians are being attacked all over the United States. And of course, we know in China and the Middle East, I mean, they're being beheaded and stuff. But here in America, the mainstream media is complicit in this, like Jesse Smollett. You have these Hollywood actors setting up these scenarios so that they can incite violence against us. And these are the very same people who are accusing us of fake news, who are accusing us of being haters, when it's been proven again and again that they're the ones broadcasting fake news and inciting violence against us. Everybody knows the most recent attack is this thug on Berkeley, but Berkeley's famous for conservative speakers just coming to speak at a conference will get ran off of stage. They will not allow them to speak. They will scream and chant and act like animals, and to where the police will have to intervene and cancel the conference because the students at Berkeley believe that they are doing something good by prohibiting freedom of speech, that they are doing something good by bullying somebody completely off of the campus. And now, you know, you can go see the footage of this. I'm not going to play it, but yeah, he just walks up and punches an innocent guy right in the face just because he's a conservative and was out there, you know, recruiting for their chapter on campus. And then, of course, we had, remember the Phillips, the Native American, in confrontation with the little high school kid with the MAGA hat, that the mainstream media incited such violence and hatred against this. This is a minor. This is a child, a high school kid. This little boy was receiving death threats. They took this picture out of context, trying to make him look like he was assaulting this guy. They went and got Phillips and paraded him around on all their mainstream media, telling the lie that this little boy had stood, that he was trying to leave, and this little boy had blocked his way and was standing in his way. And they used this picture as evidence. Yeah, until the actual whole video came out, and you see that Phillips is the one who walked straight into them. No one was blocking his way and holding him captive or anything. These were little kids on a class field trip waiting for their bus. They were told to meet there. They weren't trying to have some sort of protest. They were told to meet at this spot so that their school bus could pick them up. And they were singing their high school anthem chant thing. And the fact is, they were being abused. The video shows that for like 40 minutes that another group of black racists were screaming obscenities at them, at children. And you can see in the video that the kids are just smiling and having fun like kids do, waiting for their school bus. And this guy Phillips decides to take it a step further and physically walk into the crowd of school children who were waiting for their bus. He's the one who went toward them and then went on the mainstream media and propagated this lie that he was just trying to leave and they were blocking his way, like he was held captive and all this. So you can see who the fake news is. So why is it that someone like Alex Jones gets removed from all of the platforms and we can't make any videos about school shootings or anything? Yet all of the mainstream news outlets targeted this minor, a high school kid, and incited violence and hatred toward him until he and his family were getting death threats. His school was getting death threats. Why aren't they held accountable? Why aren't they held to the same standards we are? Surely you can see the hypocrisy that we can't even make a video about the Florida school shooting, but they can promote hatred and violence towards this innocent child based on lies, utter lies. The evidence is out now. The fact is, everything they broadcast was a lie.
And it was Phillips who approached the boys, not as it first appeared, the other way around. He walked among the group as they appeared to chant to his drum beats.
We see it again and again. They're purposely inciting violence against us. I mean, Jesse Smollett's the perfect example. He wanted to incite violence against us so bad, he was willing to pay someone to give him a beating so that he could incite hatred against us and tell people, oh, they were wearing a MAGA hat. They said this is MAGA country. And it was because LGBT and because he's black and all this. So we know this is proven. He's been arrested. This is a fact, not a conspiracy theory, that these Hollywood elitists, these leftists, they are inciting violence and hatred against us. At the very same time, they're trying to tell everybody we're the haters. And that's what he was doing. He was saying, when he hired these people and wrote the script for this hoax, he said, well, you got to wear a MAGA hat and you got to do this. And the same thing they did with that little high school boy. And it wasn't just him. The media was complicit because then they put him on TV on all of their Good Morning America shows and had him do, he's an actor, right? So he put on the act with the tears and oh, how, he was so persecuted by us bigots. And it was all a lie. Nobody did this to him. He's the perpetrator. We're the victims. And remember when leftists got physical and attacked Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk?
You took my hat. Get off my... You shot an old man in the face with pepper spray. The president. You ain't supporting shit.
So the point is, it's going on all over the nation. It's clear that the mainstream media and the leftists have incited hatred and violence to the point that they've got their leftist followers physically attacking and assaulting conservatives and Christians. But anyway, that's enough of that. If you want a zillion more examples, you can go to this video I made, What is Going On? Liberal Hypocrisy and Intolerance. And that's 30 minutes. It's this one with the thumbnail of Trump's star being sledgehammered off the Walk of Fame. And it shows example after example after example of just this violence, actual physical assault on Christians and conservatives. This is the proof. There's evidence. It's not a conspiracy theory. None of these are shown on the mainstream news. Now, Jesse Smollett, he can come forward with some fake hoax, and he's broadcast, boom, 24/7. They'll play that stuff day and night. But all of these, this is the evidence. Go look in this video. The clips that I just showed you were out of this video. One after the other of actual physical assaults, just like we saw in Nazi Germany leading up to the Holocaust. Remember, it didn't start with the trains. It didn't start with the gas chambers. It started with this. The propaganda in Nazi Germany inciting hatred against an entire people group. Remember, they were busting store windows out. And that's what we see today. I just showed you the clips. We're being beaten, punched in the face, assaulted, censored, our livelihoods taken away. That's the equivalent of burning down someone's store. When overnight, like what happened to me on YouTube, when I'm making a couple $1,000s a month on YouTube, I've been on there for 11 years, and my family depends on that. That's my income. That's how I pay my house payment, my car insurance. And without notice, just one day I wake up and they're like, you're not eligible to monetize. No copyright strikes, no community guidelines strikes. My thumbs up are at like 95% or better. I don't have any strikes or anything. I haven't done anything to disobey the guidelines. But just because I am a conservative Christian, Overnight, they're just like, you're fired. No pink slip, no severance pay, no 30 days eviction notice, nothing. Overnight, they took my income away where I couldn't pay my house payment or provide for my child. And nobody cares. Nobody cares that they're taking our livelihoods away and punching us in the face and inciting death threats against our little conservative children. They're like this. They're just going on to work. It's exactly what happened in Nazi Germany leading up to World War II. What people don't learn from history, they are doomed to repeat. So if this shows you anything, surely it shows you we are on the road to World War III. In fact, I believe that the war has already started, and that's really what this entire video is about. That we can't make sense of the events around us, how the world works, how the world really works, because of an organized campaign of cover-ups, censorship, suppression of information. So they keep us in the dark, and we can't make sense of the events that are happening all around us, the world we actually live in. It's just a constant stream of anomalies. We're like, well, that doesn't make sense. How come if it's a forest fire, all the trees are still standing, and yet the marble countertop or the granite countertop on this person's kitchen completely disintegrated to dust? How is that possible? How is there a plastic trash can here that's still sitting there, and yet 10 feet away, there's an object made of metal that takes like 3,000 degrees to melt, and it's completely disintegrated? So we just see anomaly after anomaly after anomaly, and we know something's wrong. We know it doesn't match up, that this can't be true, but we can't make sense of it because we're kept in the dark. But when you see reality for what it really is, then all of this stuff makes sense. When you understand that the war is already going on, but it's a high-tech war. We're so programmed to think that it would look like Black Hawk helicopters or tanks rolling through the street, when in fact, it's weather wars. It's them hitting our major cities with frequency technologies that cause massive amounts of refugees. It's them evacuating areas using technologies like this, where they literally wipe out the area. They don't use eminent domain anymore and say, hey, we just want to buy up this land, so you have to move out of your house because we're claiming eminent domain. We'll give you X amount of money, now get going. They've moved way beyond that. They're like, if we want to clear an area, it's war. It's war. They're targeting cities, regions, and I believe that's what we're seeing. And certainly the men in black have gone to great lengths to impress upon us that it's only humans. There are only humans involved in this war. There aren't any aliens, there aren't any cryptids. Every instant like that, the shadow government, the men in black show up, right? And it's threats and murder and cover-ups and all of that. So that's what I really want to talk about. This coming world war, the next world war, the last world war, Armageddon, is a little more like War of the Worlds than what we think of as World War. So here is where things start getting sort of fringy. Because most of us, if you're on this channel anyway, most of us agree that there are other races, that there are Nephilim races, there are humanoid hybrid races that we've seen records of throughout all of world history, from the beginning of time to the remnants now that we call the quote-unquote aliens or the cryptids and all of that. But they're humanoid hybrids. But we know they're not coming from outer space. They're not coming from the stars. They are coming from under our feet. They're coming from the underground bases, the underwater bases. And of course, many even believe that they walk among us, which of course wouldn't be a stretch of the imagination at all. Yes, the ancient texts and all of the ancient records from our ancestors show these hybrid creatures that look like a mix between humans and animals, but they also show that many of the fallen angels, the pagan gods, were human in form. So of course it would make perfect sense that there are also races of fallen angel, human hybrids, Nephilim races that are indistinguishable from humans physically. If you just look at them, they don't have to look like Dogman or Sasquatch or an alien or reptile or anything like that. They can be demon spawned from the fallen angels and look like this, look human. And that's reported all the time, both in the UFO community and throughout world history. Like the Aryan race, the demigods, these superhuman people that had blonde hair and blue eyes that Hitler's occult regime were obsessed with. I think the UFO community calls them the Pleiadians. They look human, they're kind of blonde-haired, light-skinned, blue eyes. There's also the Alpha Centaurians and things like that. But the point is, this War of the Worlds idea, this alien invasion idea, Hollywood has propagated, has to look like the War of the Worlds movies. The Cabal and the Hollywood Magic Show are always misdirecting us. They're misdirecting us to think of an alien invasion is going to look like little grays showing up and shooting laser weapons at us or something. Or it's going to be these mechanical tripods coming down, going through the cities. But what if the alien invasion is already going on? What if the war is already underway? And many of these demon spawn are human in form and really are living among us. And that is where Paradise, California, comes into play, and its neighboring and aptly named Helltown. Now, a couple of months ago, David Wilcock gave an exclusive interview to Edge of Wonder. So I'm not going to play his entire interview since he wanted to give it to them exclusively. I will throw in just like 5 seconds or 10 seconds here or there, and I'll put the link below in the description box so that you can go and listen to the entire interview. It's in like 3 parts. I don't know, it's around an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. But anyway, this is extremely fringy, but extremely fascinating. Because I have studied David Wilcock forever, since he first came out and nobody had ever heard of him. And when he was brand new, I really enjoyed him. He was a young man, and he first came out saying that he was the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce, and not all that's been kind of swept under the rug now. He doesn't talk about that stuff anymore. But I remember all of that when he was first getting started. And he went through a phase where I really disconnected with him, but I still listened to what he had to say because that's how I do my research. I try to listen to all the sides. And he got hooked up with the Gaia network, which was very Luciferian. So I always kept him on my radar, but I quit giving him much credence. But just recently, in the past year or so, he came out, he left Gaia Network, he called them out for what they are. He said they are Luciferian Network, and he gave a press release, a written statement. I did a video on it when it happened. Lots of people in the truth community did. But he said he actually did it. He left Gaia. And he didn't mealy-mouth around or beat around the bush. He said they were Luciferian, that they were taking his videos and his research, and they were editing his clips in such a way to make it seem like he supported their Luciferian worldview. So that made me give him a second chance, and it also made me go back to my files and look through some of the other things that I had recorded of him to see if maybe I was misjudging him because it was as he said. They had snipped and clipped his interviews together to make it seem like he was supporting their Luciferianism. And my point of going through all that is to tell you that I know that David Wilcock is telling the truth when he speaks about Paradise, California, because I remember him talking about this place where there were these alien, quote unquote, alien races, right? These like Alpha Centaurian types were living above ground in a city and in a sort of peace treaty with the human military in a sort of beta test hybrid community. And they had their own dentists and all of this stuff so that they wouldn't be detected. Because I remember at the time having a poor view of David Wilcock. I was thinking, oh yeah, right, you're propagating that these are these good aliens, right, who are coming to colonize Earth and they're our friends and just the typical stuff you see out of the New Age movement. But I didn't just dismiss the information completely. I never throw the baby out with the bathwater. You guys know there's always truth mixed with deception everywhere around us. So you just have to sift and discern. And since I had been listening to him for so long, I did find evidence that his sources, his secret sources from the military and these different agencies, had been proven true over the years several times. You know, you have to watch it play out over several years, but many times things that he had said years before were absolutely proven true later. So I did have a measure of faith in his sources, although I didn't have complete faith in their interpretation of events and who these people were and David's interpretation or perception of what was happening. But it's a compelling idea, like the TV series Eureka, that there would be an entire town set aside, not just underground bases. But of course, there could be a town or a community or several of them set aside for these types of experiments. But keep in mind that his sources in these agencies were telling him about this town, Paradise, California, back 9 or 10 years ago, and he was telling us about it. But now, in hindsight, I mean, you have to admit, what are the odds? It's at least compelling that all these years later, then we have this incineration of the entire area and all of these people who were living in these communities who just seem to be unaccounted for in this exact location in Paradise? In Paradise?
For 11 years. And it's the most important small town in the United States where these people were being given safe haven and refuge. Okay? And I'm not making this up. I've got recordings with Henry Deacon going back to 07, 08, 09 that I could dig out where we're talking about Paradise, California. This is nothing new. And I've had 3 other insiders confirm that these treaties exist and that the only 2 cities like this in America were Paradise and someplace in Nevada that we don't even know exactly where it is.
And actually, this theory could explain a lot of the anomalies and mysteries surrounding this Paradise fire. For example, most of you know that Aplanetruth.info was doing a series called Paradise Lost, and it was tragic because he was boots on the ground. He lives out there, and he was going to the shelters and the refugee camps and the Red Cross sites, and he was trying to account for the people and what they were saying on the news. And he kept broadcasting, I'm here, I'm in the shelter, I don't see, where are the people? And, you know, he was doing boots on the ground coverage of the actual event. And one of his videos that went really viral was this 52,000 missing people versus the 88 people reported dead. And here's another pathetic but interesting thing. I just realized when I went back to grab the clip from his video that his whole channel's been taken down. Aplanetruth.info is gone. His life's work, thousands of videos. It was almost like 250,000 subscribers and gone. They took him down. So I had to grab this off of a mirrored channel that only has 27 views. If you guys are looking for him, he has a backup channel. It's called Aplanetruth 2. But he only has like 6,000 subscribers now, and his video views, he only has like 200 views on each of his videos. And I didn't plan this, but is this not the perfect example of my introduction to this information? That this is the reason why we live in a false paradigm, because this is really happening. It's beyond censorship. We live in a world that is nothing like they tell us it is. And they censor the dissenting voices so the truth can't get out. But yes, he was broadcasting the truth. He was there on the ground visiting the shelters. And he was in tears in his videos because he was saying, where are these people? There's 50,000 people unaccounted for. Where are they? And I think the information provided by David Wilcock absolutely has something to do with that. What if? Just entertain the possibility for the sake of having an interesting conversation. What if all of the citizens in that region weren't necessarily people? Or maybe that's strong language to say that they're not people, but not regular, average humans. I think only God will be able to sort it out at this point, who is more human than demon and who is more demon than human. But what if those Secret Service military sources that say this was a settlement, this was part of a peace treaty where these, what most people call aliens, but we know are the Nephilim. What if this was a Nephilim settlement? And where did they go? We'll get into that in just a minute about the underground bases. But here's some clips from Aplanetruth.info's original coverage at the actual time of the Paradise, California disaster.
The Guardian, the New York Times, USA Today, as you'll see, CBS, 60 Minutes, are all using the number that 52,000 evacuated. We can't find them, folks. All right, so this is the USA Today article. This is from, I don't have the date on here, but they're saying that it broke out the morning of 9/8. This is the Paradise Fire. The evacuation of 52,000 people, of which 1,385 are in shelters and 130 remain unaccounted for. So that's about 1,500 people out of 52,000. 1,500 minus 52,000 is 50,500 people. Where are they? This is a picture sent to me from someone in Paradise that used to have a home in Paradise, and they're calling this a forest fire, folks. They're calling it a forest fire. Forest fire. All I see is homes lost. It should be homes lost and people lost fire. Garbage cans that were melted, unmelted. How can that be possible that garbage cans didn't even get melted? Look in the background. The home's completely trashed, folks. Oops. Home's completely trashed. Let me expand it out a little bit. I mean, are you kidding me? You're going to tell me this is a forest fire when the garbage cans, you know, microwaves in plastic, you can put plastic in the microwave, unless you put it a really long time like here, it won't do anything. You put a metal like an aluminum foil around a burrito, it'll catch fire. We know it's directed energy weapons. We have so much proof and evidence. It's incredible. This I posted yesterday, very important piece to look at, the occult backstory of Bohemian Grove, Paradise, and Sacramento, showing how the layout and Santa Rosa as well. Satan's Rose, Santa Rosa. Chico is also known as the rose, lined up on the meridians of the rose. You need to look at this to understand the occult behind why they chose Paradise, why Chico, why Sacramento, why San Francisco, why Santa Rosa, and why the Bohemian Grove. It's all included in there. And what is this picture all about? Top of a CAL FIRE truck, you have CAL FIRE employees with a high-range sniper rifle that can shoot over 1,800 meters to kill. On top of a CAL FIRE truck during the fires? Anyone want to talk about this? Anybody?
Why would the most important city in America for human extraterrestrials burn down so fast that people died in their car trying to pull out of the driveway, right?
And then there were all of those anomalous, mysterious accounts of people saying that they weren't allowed to leave, that there were authorities posted at certain roads, not blocking traffic, not helping them evacuate, but telling them they had to turn around and go back. And there was one guy who had a truck and he went around the roadblock and took off down the highway, you know, on the wrong side of the road and made it out. So he said, I know for a fact that it was clear because I escaped on that route. So there were all of these mysteries. Why were certain people from certain regions stopped by roadblocks and not allowed to escape the region? Now, taken out of context, it doesn't make any sense at all. You just buy the excuse. But taken into context of a war setting, that there were these military type incredible firearms mounted on these fire trucks, and that there were directed energy weapons, incinerating areas and stuff. If you take this in the context of this was a war zone, then it makes a little more sense. So sadly, like I said, those videos that he mentioned aren't back up. I don't think they're back up. He's posting a frenzy of his old videos archived onto his backup channel right now. So they might be going back up. I hope that he does get his channel back up because it's a wealth of information. And again, just like with David Wilcock, I disagree with him on a ton of stuff, but I agree with him on a ton of stuff. So when I recommend these channels and put these links up for information's sake, it doesn't mean that I agree with their worldview on every single thing and that our brains are part of a hive mind that think exactly alike. That's just not the case. So as always, all of the links will be below, but please don't consider that an endorsement from me that all of his, say religious views are 100% correct or anything of that nature. It's just information. Okay, that being said, it's so sad that his whole Paradise Lost series is gone, because there's another video that I wanted to post a clip of, but I'll just tell you what it said. He was on site in this one interviewing people inside. It was toward the end of the rescue efforts, and they had begun consolidating and closing down some of the many refugee camps. And he was interviewing the people working in these different tents. They were closing down facilities, and he could only find like 300 people. And he was saying, but there's still all of these missing people. Aren't they still going to need the medical and the dental to identify the remains and stuff like that? And they said no, they had their own special dentists on staff, and that they had decided there was no need. And he couldn't understand that. He just kept saying, I don't understand. What do you mean? How do you know you're not going to recover anybody else when there's still so many, missing? Even by your numbers, you're saying hundreds and hundreds are still missing. I don't understand. Why are they sending the dentists home? I don't understand. And he just kept going on about that. And that's another mystery that would be explained by what David Wilcock had been saying. He verbatim said when they set up this town and integrated these hybrids into a community that they had to have all of their own staff there because of there were differences, that they're primarily human looking, but their teeth was one particular thing that was different about them.
Paradise had dentists who were trained in how to treat their teeth because, of course, with the serrated bottom and the wideness, the teeth are wider than ours, and there's fewer of them. They can't just get a normal dentist. They had special people living in Paradise who knew about these folks and were trained on how to handle them and how to deal with them.
So you can see, as strange as all of this sounds, in the context of a bigger reality, all of this does make sense. All of the eyewitness accounts of these strange anomalies that were going on during the fire, people dressed as firemen that were actually like military guys, and roadblocks and strange situations with dentists and all of that, with it's just a wildfire. Not, everybody's like, what's going on? This doesn't make any sense. And that's not even to mention all of the cell phone footage of the directed energy weapons being used. Now, from what I understand, or as of the last interview I saw with David Wilcock, he was contending that this probably happened because disclosure was about to happen, that these benevolent aliens were going to reveal themselves, and so the cabal took them out. Now, for me personally, this is one of those places where I part ways with David's opinion. I think it's more in line with the things that we've seen in world history, which is what we always see with the fires to destroy their evidence. Just like you saw with the McMartin preschool case, they filled in the tunnels and they burned down the building to hide the evidence. And I know David's coming from more of a UFO community perspective, but I think that all of us agree that there's a hybrid breeding program. All of the UFO and alien abductees say that they were harvesting eggs, harvesting sperm, they were creating hybrids, they took their fetus, all of those types of reports. And on the total other end of the spectrum, in the satanic cults, all of the SRA survivors report the same thing, that they were bred, they were breeders, they were using certain members of the cult were used as breeders, and that they had these hybrid babies and, reptilians and all sorts of weird stuff. The SRA survivors report multiple races, including things like minotaurs and mythological creatures.
Okay, hello. My name is Frances Toes, and as a way of introduction, I will tell you I am a client of Sandra Fax, and I have experienced Satanism in 3 types. So the ancient ritualistic type, the one that was made into a scientific method through MK Ultra, and a very high-tech variety as well. I've been used as a breeder to produce infants for sacrifice. I've been used in other breeding experiments. One of them was quite esoteric. It went on for years, and it involved being bred with a species that we think is mythological, but it isn't. It just comes from somewhere else.
So surely people can see it's no coincidence. Centurions, the UFO community who still believes these creatures are coming from outer space, you know, they've convinced us they're coming from outer space because for generations, that's what they've been feeding us, right? Through all of the science fiction and through all of the New Agers who are channeling aliens, right? They're all coming from outer space. Oh, it's Zeta Reticuli, the Zetas and the Pleiadians and all of this. But surely you can see that this is part of the programming. They don't want our minds to come to the most logical conclusion that these are the same monsters from all of the ancient records ever left on Earth. Every single culture, every single religion, it doesn't matter your language, your ethnicity, they all record these demons, these monsters, these jinn, whatever, all these different, you know, ancient Egypt, all of the hieroglyphs and all of the records of these hybrid races, they all confirm the biblical narrative. These things aren't coming from outer space. They're coming from the underworld. It actually says in the records, the underworld. Now we call it, you know, deep underground military bases, or we call it the cloning centers, or, you know, but we're all saying the same thing. The underworld, the underground bases, the cloning centers, hell, whatever. It's all the same thing. But none of it points to them coming from outer space. That's the official narrative. That's what they've been programming our generations with through all of the books from way back, from the War of the Worlds broadcast, all of our Hollywood movies, and it's been effective. People can't fathom that these things are a part of our world. They were cast out of heaven. They were excommunicated from the higher frequency dimensions. They are here with us in this lower subset of dimensions. Revelation 12:9, the great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. And we all know this Bible verse by now. This is Genesis 6, where it talks about the angels that were cast down saw the daughters of humans were beautiful. And that word is not actually translated beautiful. It's a fit extension. A fit extension. Tom Horn has done a tremendous amount of work on that. I've done videos on it. At this point, almost everybody who deals with Bible prophecy has done videos on that. That word actually translates, they saw the daughters of humans were a fit extension. They were trying to resurrect themselves. They wanted us to be their extension cord. Human beings were created in God's image. In the beginning, read all of the records. Before the contamination of the human gene pool, humans could walk and talk with God. They could still perceive the higher dimensions. They weren't excommunicated. But when the fallen angels contaminated the human gene pool by trying to use us as an extension to get back to the higher frequencies, instead, it contaminated our DNA, and now we're excommunicated. And from the rest of this verse, it appears that that's when we lost immortality as well. And they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for now they are mortal. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. And also afterward, when the sons of God, the fallen angels, went into the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, the men of renown, the demigods, the hybrids, the human hybrids. It says it clearly. Every culture, every ancient text, it doesn't matter the ethnicity, doesn't matter the continent. They talk about these demigods. It lists them by name and it'll tell. They'll say this one was 2/3 human and 1/3 God. This one was half and this one was half. that sort of thing. They were the heroes of old, the men of renown, the demigods recorded in all cultures, not just in the Bible, but yes, also in the Bible. Hybrids, human hybrids. And they are here with us in the earth, right here, hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. The earth, they're here with us. And every record confirms that. From the beginning of recorded human history to the very present, people are still reporting the same thing. And they have us so divided. Oh, well, you're the UFO community, and oh, you're the Christian community, that we're not listening to each other, because we're all saying the same thing. What's the difference between these people, these, say, MILABs, military abductees, that say they're taken to these deep underground military bases where they see these reptilians, and they've got humans in cages and hybrids and labs and all this horrific stuff, or say this man, Bill Weiss, who's about as mainstream Christian as you can get, and yet he had that experience, 23 Minutes in Hell, that he wrote the book about. But that was a religious experience, right? That he had an out-of-body experience where he said he went underground and having these giants and giant reptiles throw him around and break his bones and keep him in a cage. Doesn't that sound exactly like what the military abductees are saying? Doesn't that sound an awful lot like what Donald Marshall says he experienced when they were pulling him out of his body? I mean, is Donald Marshall really saying anything new? Look back at all of the art throughout all of world history, in the Middle Ages, all the way back to ancient times, and what do you see? All these strange hybrid creatures in all of these layers of underground bases and caverns. And what do? They go out above ground and they steal people, right? Missing people. Look at the things they do with them. Isn't that exactly what all the SRA victims report is happening to them? These are depictions of hell throughout all eras of history. Everybody who's ever had a quote-unquote vision of hell, an astral projection, all of these things that are part of the human experience. People who were physically in the 3D, in 3D, physically taken to underground bases, as well as their souls being snatched up. Isn't that what the Bible says? They're trying to trap your soul. So none of this is new. It's just new to us, because the cabal has banned the Bible and forbidden us to be educated in the true world history and the human history and what is normal for human experience, to dumb us down so we don't know who we are and we don't know where we are. So for all of you people out there who believe there is no hell, all these hippy-dippy New Age religions that preach, oh, there's only heaven, God is all merciful, there is no evil, evil is just a personification of blah, 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 blah. No, surely you've heard the old adage that Satan's biggest trick is to convince people he doesn't exist. Are you really that easily duped that you will dismiss all of the humans around you? All humans, not just Christians, not just the Bible, but all human records from all eras of history that say evil absolutely does exist. There absolutely is an underworld. And the entities that reign there are evil. Evil exists. And you need to learn to protect yourself and not be so easily duped. Just because it lies below the surface doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just like a shark in the ocean, just because it dwells beneath the surface doesn't mean that it can't come up and bite you. And all of these paranormal, supernatural, quote-unquote anomalies we see in the world aren't paranormal at all. They're normal. They're part of our reality. So it's time we cope with it, because we need to protect ourselves. In case you guys haven't noticed, the spiritual warfare and the evil have ramped up. Look around at the depravity in our world. This is spiritual warfare, and it's time that we wake up and stand our post, because laying down and pretending evil doesn't exist has allowed them to sweep over our world, and they have swept up the souls of our children into perversion and evil and debauchery. And they have swept up our people physically. Hundreds of thousands of people are going missing every single year. And that's where David Pallady's work comes in with the Missing 411 series, where he tracks all of these strange disappearances in national forests. But what makes his books different from just cases about missing children and missing homeless people and the types of things we talked about earlier are all of his cases that he compiles in these books have some sort of mysterious event attached to them. I think a lot of people assume that he's automatically talking about Bigfoot and cryptids taking these people in the national forests, because his first book before he started the Missing 411 series was about Sasquatch tribes. So I think people thought that's all he was getting at. But if you've read his work and listened to his interviews, then you know that it's much more than that. There's tons of odd experiences. A very common one in the national forests would be people go missing and they bring the bloodhounds in, and the dogs, there's no scent. There's nothing for them to follow, or else they're afraid to follow it. The search dogs do what a dog would do if there was no trail at all, as if the person was just, lifted up from the spot and disappeared. So there's a lot of stories like that that have a sort of almost Bermuda Triangle paranormal disappearance angle to them in these national parks. There are other ones where people were found. They were taken and then they were found, especially small children. For example, one of the cases, a small child was picked up or disappeared and then showed up something like 3 miles away and up on top of a mountain. And it was like a 2-year-old child with no shoes on. And there's absolutely no way that that child could have walked that distance and climbed that mountain. It just didn't happen. Other times, the same thing. Children left where the searchers had already searched. One time, the child was left laying over a fallen tree trunk right in the path where the searchers had gone out every single day to search for like 7 days in a row. So those are the ones that people consider more like cryptids and Sasquatch. That's pretty common. If you listen to those types of encounters, they will take someone and then they will bring them back. Or like the Native Americans said, there are good tribes and bad tribes of Sasquatch. There were ones that they were in communication with that actually claimed to be Christian and would make sticks, make the sign of the cross. They would bundle sticks together and lay them out at the end of the woods to sort of invite the Native American tribes and let them know that we're your brothers. And then there were other tribes of Sasquatch that they said were incredibly violent and were cannibals and that type of thing, and they were always at war with them. So there's good and bad, just like humans. But anyway, the point is that that's sort of common with these cryptid encounters. You'll hear it every once in a while, again and again, that they don't even have anything to do with the abduction, but they will find a missing child that went missing, that wandered off on their own, and they will bring the child back. In fact, wasn't there just a story about that in the news just not too long ago? Yeah, here it is. Casey Hathaway. What was that? The end of January, so about 5 or 6 weeks ago. 3-year-old boy lost in a freezing forest for 2 days, said something furry like a bear kept him warm and protected his life. A friendly bear saved his life and brought him back. So people suppose that was more likely a Sasquatch because that's so common. If the scoffers would quit watching the Kardashians for 2 seconds and actually spend some time listening to the eyewitness testimony as if they were in a court case, when there's thousands and millions to choose from, just listen. Just spend your life on something besides a beer and a ball game and find out what's going on around you. You'd see that this is not odd. It's not like one video of Patty back in the 1970s. It's the only Sasquatch ever reported. Is it real? No, it's like millions of reports recorded throughout all of history, all the way back from biblical times through the Native Americans right up to this week. So it's always happening. It never stopped because we share the earth with them. And there is evidence of a cover-up. When he filed Freedom of Information Acts to get information on these cases in several different states, he came face to face with a cover-up. Officials completely breaking the law and telling him right to his face they're not going to release the information. Officials calling him and interrogating him. What do you want this information for? And they're not allowed to ask that by law when you file a Freedom of Information Act. So that's a very important part of his work as well. He discovered not only are all these people going missing, but there are elements in the government who are actively breaking the law to cover up the evidence in these cases. So it's clear the mystery is just for us. They seem to know what's going on and they're hiding it from us. In fact, if you go to my channel on my playlist called Nephilim Hybrids, Science Proves the Bible, that very first video, Men in Black cover up cryptid encounters, and it goes on with several different types of cryptids. Anyway, I spent a full hour there putting example after example after example, people in their own words, interviews with people in their own words, explaining how they saw all different types of cryptids and how this government agency showed up. And no, they weren't always like, you know, like Men in Black, some weird guys in dark suits, but there were forestry people who showed up with equipment, like high frequency equipment that only dogs could hear and stuff like that. They had specific equipment designed to deal with these cryptids when they showed up. And you can hear people in the interviews tell about how they came and took their cell phones from them and took the SIM cards out of their cell phones and different things. So anyway, there's an hour devoted to just that, to show you that this really is going on. And there are black ops, there are government agencies that are trained to deal with it. They know all about it.
May 18th, 1980, 8:32 a.m. Pacific Time. The ground beneath and around Mount St. Helens rumbled. It was a catastrophic natural disaster. Nearly 60 people were killed as a direct result of the eruption, along with a tremendous amount of wildlife that had taken up residence on the mountain. There are estimations of 1,500 elk and 5,000 deer, along with numerous bears, salmon hatcheries destroyed. Along with that, there have been lingering reports of several Sasquatch possibly being among the dead creatures recovered. 2 weeks after the blast, men from the Army Corps of Engineers were dredging the Cowlitz River when they found the bodies of 2 Sasquatch in the sand along the banks. One report to the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, shortened from here on out to BRFO, was submitted by Fred Bradshaw, detailing what his father had seen as part of this cleanup effort. Armed U.S. National Guard personnel were around this pile. This was on the day they were going to move this group of bodies. My father was very close to it. When the tarps were removed, he saw the creatures, these Sasquatch creatures, some badly burned and some not. My father and the rest were debriefed. They were told to keep their mouths shut. We were told to get into a Jeep. We sat in that Jeep for maybe a half hour. Eventually, another Jeep arrived, carrying a civilian and another member of the military. The civilian was brought into the tent, and he emerged a few minutes later, followed by a large, hairy creature. It looked like a large man, covered in fur, and the best way to describe it was like Beast from X-Men, only brown. The creature looked to have some burns and had a bandage on its arm. We followed the truck to different areas. There were 5 stops in total. Each time we stopped, we were told to follow the civilian and the creature. Each time we followed them to rocky areas where there were caves. At the first area, he made a sound and we all just waited in silence. After a few minutes, the creature looked at the civilian and then at the ground. The civilian at one point touched its shoulder and called for a canteen to give the creature a drink. The same thing happened at the next area, but this time there was a response to the sound. After a few minutes, 2 soldiers emerged from the cave, carrying a badly burned creature just like the one with the civilian. The creature bent down next to it and looked it over for several minutes. It then spoke softly with the civilian. It turned and walked back to the truck. We heard a shot, and we knew it was one of the soldiers putting the creature out of its misery.
Okay, now I get it. That sounds like Chewbacca and Han Solo, that there could be an alliance between humans and other humanoid races. I know it's a big red pill to swallow, but there's just no doubt that these other species do exist. I mean, they're recorded on every continent. You can go to the Russian language and read reports of the abominable snowman. You can go to the Himalayas. You can go to the monasteries of the Buddhist monks and look at their texts and scalps and fingers and remains that they have of these quote sacred creatures and things of that nature. So They've been recorded throughout all eras of world history, even right up into modern times. And we know that movies like Star Wars are just predictive programming. Everything from Chewbacca and Han Solo to the Clone Wars. It's all predictive programming. And just like I pointed out with all of the old 1950s and 60s science fiction novels, that they've been programming us to think these things are coming from outer space. That's the deal with Star Wars. It plays into that whole deception, the misguidance, the misdirection that they practice. So when this disclosure happens, we will believe, oh, they're from outer space. They're so much more powerful than us. Or the typical Antichrist propaganda from ancient aliens. They're our creators and saviors. That's Antichrist, the imitation. That's what Antichrist means, the imitation of Christ, the counterfeit of Christ, the savior and creator. They came from the stars and they seeded earth long ago, and they're coming back to save us from ourselves and all of these cataclysms. So that's where the misdirection comes into play with, Star Wars and all of this other predictive programming. But also, this is very true. There are peace treaties and there are alliances between, quote, the kings of the earth and all of these different humanoid species. And I believe that's the peace treaty that the Bible's talking about. I did an entire video on it. I know a lot of people are going to like to hear that. But here, I spent almost an hour in this video laying out all of the Bible scriptures and all of the historical documents and stuff to present my case. It's the biggest secret, the real peace treaty, humans v. Nephilim. And in that video, I point out that's the peace treaty. The Bible verse, I know what we've been taught by the traditions of men, but if you read the Bible, what the Bible says, it doesn't say anything about Palestine or the Arab nations or that little piece of desert over there. No, it says the kings of the earth, which we know are these godfathers, the kingpins, the Illuminati, the head of the Illuminati families, the 10 kings of the earth, are in an Antichrist peace treaty. And we know that these demon spawn Nephilim are the armies of Antichrist. Satan's army is demons. It's not humans. The armies of Satan are demons. And this peace treaty between these demon spawn Nephilim races, aka aliens or whatever, this peace treaty that the Bible is talking about between the kings of the earth is with these Nephilim races. And it says verbatim, what it does say is that the sacrifices were cut off. And so they broke the peace treaty. That we've been in a peace treaty. Humans have been in a peace treaty with these demon spawn, all giving blood sacrifice, just like in ancient times where they did human sacrifice to the pagan gods. Well, it never stopped. To quote unquote, keep the peace, our kings of the earth have been in a treaty allowing these races to abduct so many people as a blood sacrifice. And it says in the Bible that at some point, those oblations will cease. And that's when the peace treaty's broken. And then that's when they attack. And that's exactly what everybody has been seeing in all of their dreams and visions. They see things, Christians who never believed in UFOs or aliens or any of that. They're like, I don't know what this means, but the Lord showed me, and there were UFOs, and there was darkness, and there were demons on the earth, there were giants eating people, all of this stuff that people are like, how do you make sense of that? What does that have to do with two politicians shaking hands? It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with what we saw going on with the pagan gods and human sacrifice throughout all of history, and what we see in this modern peace treaty, that this shadow government is in alliance, is in a treaty with these Nephilim races in these underground bases. So mainstream religion, organized religion, not talking about the holy word of God and talking about man-made traditions. Mainstream organized religion has everybody so misfocused. They're all like, well, how can the Bible prophecy of stopping the blood sacrifices possibly happen? Because there aren't any sacrifices going on anymore. So we're waiting. First, they have to rebuild a temple, even though the Holy Bible says that we're the temple of the Holy Spirit. Now, we're the temple of God. It says that clearly. No, they're saying for that Bible prophecy to be fulfilled, first we have to wait for them to rebuild a temple again, and then they have to start up the sacrifices again, so then the sacrifices can be stopped. So they're thinking that this thing is way off. They're like, well, we got all this stuff to do. But no, the peace treaty has already happened. The sacrifices are already happening, but it doesn't look like this. That's not the blood sacrifices it's talking about. It looks like this, right? All of the blood sacrifices made to all of the pagan gods, human sacrifices, babies sacrificed. And doesn't that sound exactly like what all of the SRA survivors and whistleblowers, Illuminati defectors, doesn't that sound exactly like what they say is already happening? The blood sacrifices have been happening. And we're all praying every day that this is truly the end of the blood sacrifices, that the oblation will cease now, that this thing is real. That's why we fight and we try to awaken the masses so that they will be mentally and emotionally prepared, as well as physically prepared when this is exposed. And here's a little meme I made for that video about the 1993 Oslo Peace Treaty. We've already been through this once. I've lived long enough, I've been through this. So when they're talking about now, oh, there's going to be a peace treaty and oh, Jared Kushner and it's the Antichrist. You guys, it's misdirection. They use the scriptures as a script. Scriptures. They use the scriptures as a script to misdirect us. That's the illusion. That's their magic trick. So we went through the same thing back in the Clinton administration, and there was a peace treaty. Right here, you can see them shaking hands. They all got Nobel Peace Prizes. Oh, there's peace between Israel and Palestine, and everybody got a Nobel Peace Prize. It's finally here. Was that it? Nope. It absolutely was not it. It meant nothing. It didn't fulfill Bible prophecy at all. So what makes you think that if we do it again, that it's going to be the Bible prophecy? Does the Bible prophecy have to be fulfilled like 20 times, 30 times? Or maybe we're looking for the wrong thing. And I believe it's clear that we are. The sacrifices that were stopped to break the peace treaty weren't grain offerings. They're the human sacrifices. And I'm not saying that Donald Trump is this awesome, perfect Messiah that has stopped all of this. But you have to admit something's going on. There's a lot of movement going on. And if there was a president, be it Donald Trump or anybody else, an insider from these elitist families that knew what was going on and came out and decided to do something about it, then you'd have to know that wouldn't lead to peace. That would lead to war. To do the right thing will lead to war. It will lead to the breaking of the peace treaty. It will lead to the end of the human sacrifice, the end of the human trafficking. And that will cause the satanic cabal, the very literal axis of evil, an alliance between the Nephilim hybrid demon spawn and humans who are Satanists, worshippers of these demons and servants of Satan himself. And for the QAnon supporters and the Trump supporters who believe that he is absolutely busting up the cabal, you guys need to brace yourself if you're thinking it's just going to be Make America Great Again and it's going to be super easy. Because if he or any white hats in any elements of these crime syndicates are busting this thing up, it is going to be a storm. This is the calm before the storm. There is absolutely going to be a great tribulation and a battle of Armageddon before there is 1,000-year reign of peace. And I personally believe that there is war going on underground right now. I think that's what these mystery booms are, the underground ones. I'm not talking about the skyquake, weird paranormal sounds. I'm talking about the mystery booms underground. People are reporting them all over this nation. And I myself have personally heard them. And I know about the tectonic plates shifting, and I know about that. And some of the larger ones, yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I'm not for reductionist thinking. Absolutely, that could be it. But what I heard was war out on my own porch from underground. It started, I came out because my house was shaking. There were explosions so loud that it shook my home like an earthquake. So I go out on the porch And it wasn't just the big explosions. It sounded like muffled war. I could hear single shots, I could hear machine gun fire, and then every once in a while, an enormous explosion that would shake my house. It went on for hours. It would be, and then there'd be single shots, and then an enormous explosion like a bomb going off that would shake my whole house. Everybody in this area noticed it. I called my dad and brother and had them go out and drive because I live out in the woods, drive all around the back roads and try to check in the woods and to check out in the fields, the farmers' fields across the way. And people came out of their houses like ants and were doing the same thing, driving all around the roads. Where is this coming from? You know, are we at war? What is this? So nobody thought this was tectonic plate shifting. This sounded just like muffled war underground, and it was shaking our homes. Now, this entire video, I put tons of clips of these news clips people are reporting, and they report the same thing. They're not like, oh, it's the Taos hum, like it's a drilling machine or something industrial. No, they report exactly what I heard with my own ears. They say it sounds like gunfire. It sounds like war. So if you're interested in that, both of these, mystery booms, strange sounds heard worldwide, and mystery booms being recorded across the country, these are 2 videos. They're in the Secrets of Antarctica series, because there's another one about the tunnel wars here. Whistleblowers, what's in Antarctica, white hats versus men in black. Most of you have probably seen it because it's got almost 1 million views. But that one also talks about the underground war and clearing these tunnels. And this is nothing new. Phil Schneider said the same thing. That's how he lost his fingers and got sliced open, remember, was he said they accidentally drilled into a pre-existing cavern system and encountered these races that looked like tall grays, and they got into a battle. So you can search the Dulce Wars, anything like that, Phil Schneider, and hear his story if you haven't. I'm sure almost all of you have. And he said the Navy SEALs or special forces of some kind came in and assisted in the battle. And so these underground wars are not unheard of. This is a thing that lots of people have reported over the time. What was it? I think 1972 or around that time that they said we were in a treaty with the Greys to allow them to abduct citizens just for research. And they were supposed to return them and mind wipe them so they never knew they were missing. They would just sort of have a missing time experience. But the deal was, the treaty was, they didn't get to hurt any humans. They could just, or do, terrible experiments or torture on them. They were just to study and not to hurt anybody. And the military found out that they weren't, that they were taking humans for everything from torturous experiments to a food source. And a war ensued. A war with the Greys ensued back in the 1970s. This might be it, 1979 instead of 1972. I don't know, but you can research it if you're interested in that. That reminds me of that Frantic caller into the Art Bell show. Do you guys remember that from the 1990s? And he was supposedly worked out at Area 51 and had just realized that they were being deceived by these things. He's like, they're not who they say they are. And he's trying to get the word out, and then the line gets cut off. So, of course, a lot of people think it was just a scam. And there was a guy who called into another radio show, I don't know what, 10 years later or something, a long time, years and years later, who claimed to be the guy who made the call, and he was an actor and trying to make a name for himself and stuff. I listened to that interview too, and it didn't at all sound like the same guy. If it was the same guy, then he was a really good actor when he made this call, and he was a terrible actor when he made the second call saying he was the original caller. I don't know. He could have been. He could have been the same guy. I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm just saying that I always think of this call because that's what I would be like if I was because I was in the military, but I also wasn't saved or baptized in the Holy Spirit at the time. So I didn't even believe aliens were real. And if they were, I figured they were probably aliens, I had never even thought about it and had no idea about the Nephilim. I had never read the Bible, so I didn't know anything about humanoid hybrids or anything like that. So the interview does seem sort of realistic. Like that's what it'd be like if you were working in one of these programs and all of a sudden you had the epiphany, they're not who they say they are.
Okay, what we're thinking of as aliens are they are not what they claim to be. They have infiltrated a lot of the disasters that are coming. the military, I'm sorry, the government knows about them.
My point is, I believe they're clearing the tunnels right now. I believe that there is war going on under our feet right now. I believe when we see things like the weather wars and the directed energy weapons used out and the California wildfires and that type of thing, we are seeing smaller battles of a larger war that's taking place, a covert war that they're keeping us in the dark about until the last minute. And that's sad because we're not preparing. While Germany is telling their citizens to prepare, while Russia is practicing drills, evacuating 40 million people, organizing evacuation drills of 40 million people. Can you imagine? Would the United States ever practice a drill where we evacuate an entire state? An entire state is practicing to leave that state. That's what Russia's doing. They're preparing their people for years now. This is 2016. They've been preparing for a couple of years, and their people are practicing while we're sitting here in the dark being told, oh, preppers are crazy preppers. You know, they're demonizing us. They're disarming us. They're leaving us like sitting ducks while all these other countries are preparing, massively preparing for something that's coming. While at the same time, news channels all over America are reporting for the last several years, hey, we hear gunfire and giant explosions shaking our house right under our feet. And nobody knows. Nobody knows. It's a mystery.
You would hear it in the house. Sometimes it shakes the house.
Mysterious explosions rocking an East Independence neighborhood, and no one seems to know what's causing it.
41 Action News reporter Brian Abel has the story you will not see anywhere else. It's just like, I'm jumping. Well, there's small ones and there's big ones.
Well, it feels like my whole house is just shaking. It feels like a bomb is actually going off in my backyard.
Okay, now notice the common theme in these, that not only do they feel the ground shake, but they say it sounds like gunshots, sounds like cannons going off repeatedly. That's how it sounds like explosions. It sounds like cannons going off. It sounds like gunshots and gunfire. So really, I don't think it's much of a mystery. I think it is exactly what it sounds like it is. Okay, now close your eyes. And imagine that these sounds I'm getting ready to play are muffled by being underground. But they sound like what the people say they're hearing. Explosions and then some gunshots. You see where I'm going with this?
But some experts are just baffled about what it could be.
I'm calling because we're hearing continuous, sounds like explosions. We're hearing loud explosions. My house is shaking. The horses are freaking out. Does anybody know what's going on?
It sounded like thunder, but like I said, you could feel the ground shake, and it was nothing like an earthquake. You know, we felt earthquakes before, and it's nothing like that.
You definitely knew it wasn't a firework going off, because I've never heard anything like it. Like, very disturbing.
And David and Ann, interestingly, there have been reports of a similar boom from across the United States as far as air.
It sounds like a gunshot, you know, it's explosions, gunshots, war. It sounds like war. It sounds like war under our feet, people. So it's not uncommon. This is happening everywhere else. If you can't believe it's happening here, that's craziness, because it's happening everywhere else. Look at these articles. I know, right? So I must be a crazy conspiracy theorist if I tell you the truth. So here's Newsweek. This is mainstream. This is talking about Israel to install revolutionary tunnel detection system on the Gaza border, because repeatedly the same people we're at war with, that they're at war with, have been building these tunnels and tunneling up under their buildings in the Gaza Strip and blowing stuff up. Then we have, of course, here we go. Remember this, the Islamic State, ISIS in Iraq, and the rebels in Syria are using tunnel bombs as a potent new weapon, an upgrade to an ancient tactic, according to a Pentagon organization. On March 11, ISIS forces detonated a tunnel bomb under an Iraqi army headquarters, killing an estimated 22 people. The blast consumed 7 tons of explosives in an 800-foot-long tunnel that took 2 months to dig. And that really reminds me of the second vision that I ever had. I had it 20 years ago. It was right after I received the Holy Spirit. And back then I didn't know what visions were. Nobody had ever told me about prophetic visions or the gifts of the Holy Spirit or anything. I had no idea what was happening to me. My born again experience was a radical supernatural Holy Spirit experience. So anyway, right after I received the Holy Spirit, I started having this series of visions. And this was the second one I ever had. And I saw several major cities in America bombed simultaneously, or within, seconds of each other, it seemed. Like the 9/11 attacks. There was an orchestrated attack, and I saw one go up after another after another. And here, I put this video up 5 years ago about it. But anyway, that's when my awakening happened. That's when God woke me up and said, hey, everything is not as it seems. This is coming. Get up and stand your post. And if you've seen these, you'll notice that I talk about the strange thing. They were so huge that it was like a nuclear explosion. I mean, what I saw was mushroom clouds rising over the horizon, enormous. But I didn't see any bombs or missiles or anything. So after seeing what's going on over in the Middle East and the Syrian war and Israel and all of this, yeah, it makes me wonder if these bombs haven't been planted under major cities. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that every underground battle is like a Phil Schneider type battle with these alien forces, these Nephilim hybrids or anything. Obviously, the most of it is against these crime syndicates, against the deep state and the drug runners and all of that type of thing. Remember this bust? It was just a few months ago. This drug smuggling tunnel that was found running all the way from Mexico into the kitchen of a Kentucky Fried Chicken in Arizona. What was that? Yeah, see, August of 2018. And here are the pictures of that. This is the Kentucky Fried Chicken that the entrance came up into the kitchen of. Here's the entrance that was covered up in the kitchen. And then here's what the tunnel looked like running all the way into Mexico. So the bottom line is, it's just a fact. It's an absolute fact that there are tons of things going on underneath our feet that we're not aware of. There are tunnels everywhere. And some of these underground tunnels and underground cities that have been discovered have been there since ancient times, like this one under Turkey that went up right under the houses, like David Wilcock talked about in Paradise, California. Well, we've discovered in ancient Turkey that was a fact. There were underground cities hidden under surface level cities. And like Sfali spoke of in her interview in my last series, The Black Awakening, about the same thing underground beneath the Vatican. And here are pictures of the underground tunnels underneath France, which are essentially just catacombs full of just bones upon bones upon bones. And there are some more sinister stories about those tunnels as well. Then we have all of these maps of all of these anomalies, suspected entrances into the earth, strange areas that you might call portals like the Bermuda Triangle, patterns of animal mutilations, and of course, missing people. David Paulides has spent all of this effort compiling all of these strange missing cases like that, and he found out that they're epicenters. these people are being taken from specific areas. So clearly that's compelling evidence that there are pockets in these national forests, in the mountains, in these remote places, where there are some of these remnants of these other species, tribes of them still existing there, or else these are related to the underground bases and they're kidnapping people also that way. And that's a compelling theory too, because if you overlay the maps of the underground railways on top of David's map of the disappearances, yeah, it kind of also plays toward the SRA abductions and that type of thing. Are they taking people and taking them in these underground bases? And there was at least one report in one of David's books where a guy reported that the ground opened up and closed over him. And he had to wait until it reopened and he was able to escape. He lived through it. So it was more like he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I've heard of other people reporting things like that, like airplanes going over certain areas out in the middle of the wilderness, people's private planes. And they'll see the ground like unzip and pull apart, that it's clearly mechanical, it's camouflage, that there was something there. There are several reports of hangars built into the sides of mountains, and they'll have giant hangar doors that are just camouflaged as the side of the mountain, and people seeing them open up. And that's not just from Area 51 or Groom Lake whistleblowers. There are reports of that type of thing happening all the way back again with the Native Americans. Like, here's a gateway that they talk about, a certain time of year it opens like a portal and these giants come out. So again, out of context, somebody's report like that was, a rock opened up and I got trapped in there, sounds absolutely insane. But it's been recorded by people all throughout world history, as well as right up to modern times. In fact, that is one of the quote-unquote coincidences that David Paulides points out that he found, one of the patterns, that these things happen around these rocks, these sort of megalithic boulder parks, and around the coastlines near the water or near the Great Lakes. So again, I don't think reductionist thinking is going to get us there. I think there are a lot of different things going on, but it is interesting that these locations do appear to also line up with the underground bases. And that also matches up with another one of the claims that David Wilcock was making about this city in Paradise, California. He said that these same sources had told him that this settlement of what they call aliens, but we call the Nephilim hybrids in Paradise, California, that the town was built with tunnels that actually went up underneath many of the houses.
They predominantly live in underground bases. As part of the treaty, they might be given a house, but then the house will have an elevator shaft that will actually go deep down and then go down to one of these sub-shuttles where they can shuttle over to their underground city. So the house is not necessarily where they live all the time.
So that could also explain the big mystery of where are the 50,000 people, the unaccounted for, that haven't shown up as refugees anywhere else. I mean, maybe that's the answer that Aplanetruth.info hasn't considered. That maybe they went down, maybe they didn't leave by the roads at all. Maybe a large percentage of the population of that area went back down into the underground bases. That could explain why they didn't show up either in the body counts as those among the dead, and they also didn't show up in the refugee camps or in the Red Cross tents. I mean, honestly, it didn't have to be either or. There was a third option. And that's sort of similar with a lot of CIA assets, these houses, like he said, like David Wilcock just said, that a lot of them didn't even primarily live in those houses. Even Stephen Paddock in the Las Vegas shootings, you heard reports of his neighbors saying, we didn't even know anybody lived in that house. And other times that CIA assets we see involved in different operations and arrests, there will be that mystery. Well, there was no furniture even in the house. What's going on? Those types of things. So I don't think it's beyond the stretch of the imagination that there could have been homes there that people weren't actually living in full time. as far as the underground bases and how many of them escaped by going down into the ground. You know, I don't know. There's no way for me to vet any of that information. I just thought it makes for interesting conversation. And for those of you who haven't heard that whistleblower testimony, I thought I would pass that on. And like I already mentioned in part 2 of this series, we know for a fact that these underground cities are real, and they go back thousands of years. This is nothing new. We've discovered them. Archaeologists have discovered them all over the world. And the tunnel systems of this underworld aren't just in the United States. They're everywhere, especially under London and Paris and all over Europe. They're everywhere. And they're enormous. This one under Turkey, they said could easily house 30,000 people. So when we're talking about 50,000 people missing, or 30,000 people, or even 10 or 11,000 people, this is the enormity of the underworld. And again, this is just one ancient underground city. Nowadays, with all of the high-speed rail systems and everything else under there, it's completely plausible that tens of thousands of people could actually have evacuated down. And of course, that's not to say that everybody that might have evacuated downward would be some sort of Nephilim hybrid. The whistleblower testimony from that Secret Serviceman said that there were doctors and scientists and surveillance companies and all sorts of people stationed there, if you will, that, were people working for the government. But whether you believe that that area of the West Coast had any sort of covert operations going on, or had any sort of secret entrances to the underground tunnel systems and underground bases and things like that, that's up to you. But I just wanted to point out, for the sake of this video, that the underworld is real. And when we say the underworld, like talking about the mafia and stuff, oh, it's the underworld, it's the black market type thing, I'm talking about an actual underworld. All of the ancient texts and the pagan religions talk openly about it. We have found it. Archaeologists have found it. We even see these types of things in the Grand Canyon that, no, of course, was not cut by some stream over 1 billion years. It was from the last Earth cataclysm. That's from an earthquake. It split open. And when it did, it revealed these holes in the side of the Grand Canyon. And that's from that underworld, from the underground cavernous ancient cities. It's real. There is an underworld, both with the remnants of these ancient races underground, as well as the modern day high-tech deep underground military bases. And in fact, at this point in world history, several of these hybrid species and what we call humans, Homo sapiens, are actually working together. They're in treaty working together. So this is where Agenda 21 comes in, or the sustainable living communities that they're doing, because they want to herd us all together like livestock into pens. And you can see they don't want us anywhere. They want us in these big metropolitan areas, and they control the rest of the land. The red and the yellow isn't for us. Look at that. The core reserves and corridors, little to no human use, is red. And then the yellow is highly regulated use. That means only them. And then we have the border here, which they have as a 200-mile wide international zone of cooperation. Now that makes you wonder what's really going on with this Trump wall. Why they don't want this wall. There's some reason they don't want this wall, and it's not just because they care about immigrant babies, because they don't care about American babies. We just saw New York's like, yay! We can kill full-term babies. Yay! And then they're so hypocritical. They're like, oh, but we're bleeding hearts for these immigrant babies. My ass. There's something about this wall here that is getting in the way of their Agenda 21, which is now what, 2020, 2030 plan? But it's these tiny places. The pink is Indian reservations, and the blue, I guess, is everybody else's reservations. And that's essentially what they want. They want to put us into reservations. Orange really is the new black. It really is. These are our prison camps. Instead of actual prison buildings, They have more of a sustainable living area, these sort of metropolis areas where they want to herd us together. These are the human reservations. And of course, they're presenting it to us like, oh, this is so wonderful and it's biodiversity and we're trying to save nature. But I don't want to live in their high-tech 1984 surveillance society metropolis. And honestly, you know, it's just stage one anyway, because that's the exact same thing that the Nazis did with the Jews. Stage one was ship them off to the ghettos, right? Was that they couldn't live in the same places as everybody else in Germany. They were gathered together into the ghettos. And they told them that was for their own protection, right? And then once they had relocated them all together in the ghettos, then came the trains, and the concentration camps were the next step. And as always with the predictive programming, it's essentially what they showed us with the districts in the Hunger Games trilogy, where they had the main city, the capital, where all of the elitists were allowed to dwell, where they all dressed like drag queens and they were all perverse and sadistic and loved to watch the common people killed and just tortured and stuff, while all of the common people were essentially treated as slave labor in these districts. So is it any coincidence? It's not just Agenda 21, but doesn't that look an awful lot like the FEMA regional districts? How they've split our nation up into more controllable regions. And you can go to the FEMA website and see what the regions are. I mean, look, this is FEMA.gov. I'm not making this stuff up. This isn't a conspiracy theory. These are the regions. They've already split it up so that it's controllable. So it's not just predictive programming. If you pay attention to what's actually going on around us, what the government is actually setting up all around us, you'll see that there's some eerie similarities. And the predictive programming started way back. Remember the movie Metropolis? Of course, by Fritz Lang out of Germany. They were very open about it even back then with the upside down pentagram. So it was never just about a high-tech metropolis. There was always Satanism implied. And then, of course, 1984, Brave New World. And you can just keep going through the decades from the foundations of Hollywood and see how every generation, every decade, they just keep programming us. So then in the 1970s, of course, we had Soylent Green, which you guys know, you people who are already in the deep end of the pool, you guys know that this isn't far-fetched. Soylent Green is not at all far-fetched. And if you think it's bad now, can you only imagine when they round everybody up into the metropolis, into the mega regions? And then as they started to disclose all of these hidden technologies, these black operations and stuff, towards the end of the 1990s, then we got Matrix, which programs us into the next step, the concept of artificial intelligence, and when machines could actually overtake the human race. And everybody knows they've already mainstreamed that with their front man, Elon Musk, and the Neuralink to merge the human brain with AI and all of the biohacking and all of that. So they've already mainstreamed that. And this will lead to the mark of the beast technology that we're talking about, that the Bible says once you take it, you're done. There is no going back from that point, just because you won't have your own will anymore at that point. It's like a technological possession. You have given yourself over to be possessed by this other entity. So be aware, it doesn't stop at the mega cities. They want the hive mind. They want total control. They don't just want sort of control, like social engineering control. No, they want literal control of your bodies. Demon possession, invasion of the body snatchers here. In these mega regions, there isn't going to be any currency like we have now. Paper is worth nothing. They want it all digital. You know, they've already transitioned us. All of us are already on digital. They're just going to take it to the next level with the biohacks and the implantable technologies right here. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond. Bond, that means the slaves, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save that he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So please don't be deceived. It doesn't matter how many gamers you see on YouTube or Dan TDM showing you how cool the virtual reality glasses are. and how awesome it would be to jump right into their virtual reality, because their virtual reality, their reality doesn't end so well. And a third angel followed them, calling out in a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives its mark on his forehead or on his hand, he too will drink the wine of God's anger, poured undiluted into the cup of his wrath. For he will be tormented in fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and the Lamb." If you partake of the beast system and you partake of their sins, you will indeed partake of their penalty. I don't have time to go into all of that again here in this video, but if you are interested in that and you're not aware of how all of that fits into this puzzle, I put together a playlist called Technology and Science, and it has all of the evidence and the scientific articles and the clips of them saying it out of their own mouths and all of that. So there's multiple videos on everything from immortality to transhumanism to the frequency technologies where they can literally hack your brain and move your arms, and it shows the clips. It actually shows the scientific experiments of one woman thinking a thought and making another man's arm move. It's crazy stuff. Simulation theory, the 5G network they're setting up around us, all of it, singularity, artificial intelligence, just anything, how they've hacked our DNA to make us antennas through everything from viruses to chemtrails, just amazing stuff. And I have a video coming up on Rh negative blood types that ties into this, so keep an eye out for that if you're interested in this stuff. But anyway, back to the predictive programming. Then in the 2000s, this was Battle Royale. This was actually the movie. This is the guy who should get credit for Hunger Games. She stole this from him, or in my opinion, in my humble opinion, she allegedly stole the script from him. Just like everybody knows The Matrix was stolen from an African American woman. These people, they're not creators. They're not creative. All they do is steal. And the most recent predictive programming I can think of is probably Captive State, because they incorporate the Nephilim, the demons, working with collaborators in the human race. So that's Captive State. That's probably the closest to the truth, because it doesn't just have this dystopian metropolis feel, but it incorporates the Nephilim demons resurfacing and actually taking control. And it incorporates the political undertones of dissenters and collaborators. You know, we're already living that with all of the censorship and stuff. They don't want any dissenting voices. But anyway, my point is, these districts aren't just something out of a Hunger Games movie. The governments of the world have already set up these regions, and they have their control network in place. And this isn't the beginning of it. We're at the end game. They have long been setting up their Agenda 21 and their relocation programs. And again, this isn't just happening in the United States of America. I mean, why is it such a mystery that China is building all of these enormous ghost cities? I mean, the excuses they give us are just pathetic, and people are just like, oh, okay. They say, oh, well, they're just trying to keep people busy, you know, with building programs. They're just trying to inflate their economy and make people build buildings they don't need. And they broadcast that bogus excuse, 60 Minutes, everybody does a story. They don't try to hide the ghost cities, because they couldn't possibly hide. I mean, look at these pictures. They couldn't possibly hide empty housing for 100 million humans. You know, we're driving around on the back roads trying to find these abandoned prisons that they've turned into these FEMA camps and stuff, and saying, hey, look, they're setting up concentration camps and FEMA camps all around us. And here in China, they're building ghettos for 100 million people openly that have been sitting empty for years and years and years and years as they build them. And all they have to do is just show us on 60 Minutes on their mainstream propaganda network and say, oh yeah, here's China's ghost cities. It's not a mystery. They're just inflating their economy. So they're building all of these giant cities that nobody lives in. And they show us some eerie footage of the vacant cities and the empty roads. And ooh, isn't it eerie and mysterious? And we all talk about it for 10 minutes and then we move on with our lives. The whole time they're hiding it in plain sight, not from our eyes, only from our minds, because people believe everything that they program us with coming out of that boob tube, coming out of their magazines, coming out of their publishing houses. People just believe it, but I don't believe it. I mean, anybody with eyeballs can see this is Section 8 housing. These are ghettos. These are concentration camp cities. This is that sustainable living ghetto, Section 8, herd everybody into one place housing. This is for the slave labor. They've even left giant lots in each town to put their factories, so the slave labor can just, go directly to the work camps. These are work camps. I mean, this is a picture of Auschwitz, the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. This is just Section 8 housing. The only difference is that these are on a larger scale. These are for many more people. This isn't 6 million people that they're going to work to death. This is, 100 million. And here's a night vision that I posted about exactly that God showed me years and years ago. I posted this almost 4 years ago. Warning, dream, vision, end time riots, martial law, concentration work camps, and Chinese soldiers. And this was epic. This lasted all night, and it covered the span of several months, maybe even a year or more. Every time I would wake up, when I would go back to sleep, I would go right back into the vision, and it would be like 2 months more progressed in the timeline. So I saw how it unfolded from the collapse. How it started with the riots, and then came in the martial law, and then it was several months later that we started being removed into these concentration work camps. And there were absolutely Chinese soldiers standing guard over us, and we worked at tables putting together electronics. We were assembling electronics under armed guard. And in the personal factory and the personal camp I was working in, there were Chinese armed guards or Asian armed guards. And here's another video that I put up that might pertain to some of this. This FEMA barges, Google ships, mobile prisons, 16 Puerto Rico. This was after the hurricanes. And what I was talking about were these FEMA barges, how they are made, not just like prison cells, but they're made out of those shipping containers that you can put on barges or you can put on trains, and they can be disassembled. They're compartmentalized like that. And I actually show the insides of these FEMA barges, and yeah, they could be used as mobile prisons to transport people. And I mentioned another brother's vision that the Lord gave him of just that, Americans being transported to the port cities in China and literally just being dumped and thrown over the side onto the rocks, many of them not even alive anymore, like the old slave trade. And please, if you go back and watch this, please don't get your underpants in a bunch about it starts out with a clip of the leaders of Puerto Rico talking about FEMA and how FEMA was corrupt and all of that. So I immediately always get people thinking that I'm somehow supporting the corrupt leadership of Puerto Rico. And that's not it at all. I just used that news clip because she was speaking about the corruption of FEMA. And this was happening right at the time when these barges were pulling up on their coast. Of course, she and her administration are corrupt, but the video wasn't about the Puerto Rican government. It was about the FEMA barges. So please take that into consideration if you watch that video. My point is, these ghost cities in China aren't any mystery. These are the camps. Camps that are much bigger than what we saw in Auschwitz and the Nazi internment camps. These are Section 8 housing, or sustainable cities, if you will, that are created as ghettos for the slave labor force after this whole thing kicks off, which we call the Black Awakening or the rise of the Antichrist, a lot of different things. So you can go back and watch that Black Awakening series if you haven't. I talk a lot about this type of thing in there. And this is happening all over the world. They are herding humans into specific areas for their agenda, which is precisely what the Rothschilds have done with the Jews. They have gathered them all together in this little dust bowl over there so that when they have this war, they will be destroyed. This is, they don't need ovens or gas chambers or anything. They've gathered them all together. They pay, hey, we'll do you a favor. We'll set up a new Jewish state, and then gather everybody who identifies, still holds the remembrance of the book. Let's gather together all of your heritage into one place so we can contain you, so we have you all together to wipe you out. I mean, really, that's my biggest problem with most of the truth community, is that they were so easily duped by the cabal into hating Israel, meaning modern day Israel. They think, though, no, you guys know I've done a zillion videos. You can go probably into any of the last 20 videos and get the snippets on the synagogue of Satan who call themselves Jews and are not Jews. The Rothschilds and the people who consider themselves the royal bloodlines, the kings of the earth, they're not Jews. So, but they've convinced you to hate the Jews because of all this Zionist paperwork and all of this stuff. But all of the actual whistleblowers from those Illuminati families say no, they hate Israel. They hope to, right here, Swally, which was in the Black Awakening series, her testimony. She says, in fact, they hate Israel and hope one day to see it destroyed. They've got them in their concentration camp. It's a little area smaller than the size of New Jersey over there. For all of you people that think that these Rothschilds and all of them are Jews, and what you really think they want to live over there in that dust bowl, in that desert with all the rocks, where you've got two religious groups playing volleyball, lobbing rocks and grenades and rockets at each other all day long? No, the Rothschilds do not live in Israel. They never have any, they don't have any intention of ever building their castles over there in that dust bowl. In fact, that's not even the real Temple Mount. A quick search will show you that the Wailing Wall, that's not a wall of the temple. The Bible says clearly that the temple was completely flattened. There was no remnant of the temple left. I'll do a video on that here in the next few months for people who don't know that. I know that's hard to hear, but it's not. That's a wall of a Roman fortress, an old Roman fortress. And it's confirmed by several eyewitness accounts outside of the Bible, regular secular historians like Josephus. So you can go back and read the records, the historical records left by Josephus and other eyewitnesses about what happened when the temple was destroyed. And it says that it was laid bare, that they purposely didn't leave one stone standing on another because they wanted no remembrance. That was the message they wanted to send. They actually said, so when people approach the city, they will never know there was a city there. And that exactly fulfilled the prophecy out of Jesus Christ's own mouth, recorded by 3 eyewitnesses right here, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Here's the verses. When Jesus said, "Do you see all these great buildings?" replied Jesus, "Not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." So it's time we start believing the Bible instead of all these man-made traditions. All those maps that they stick in the back of your Bible, those aren't holy scripture. Those are things that the publishing house put in, that other men put in to help you understand the Bible. Some certainly with good intentions, great intentions, and others with sinister intentions. Nonetheless, it has perpetuated this man-made tradition idea that some of these locations we read about in the Holy Bible are in places that just aren't accurate. And I talk a lot about that in my Biggest Secret series, that there's more land, and you know, these biblical maps are inaccurate. But for the sake of this video, what I'm talking about is the Temple Mount and the Wailing Wall. It's not a wall of the temple. Jesus said right here, there wouldn't be any stone left one upon another. And that was exactly fulfilled according to all of the eyewitnesses who lived in that era. I'm sure a lot of you have already figured that out. I mean, you can tell by the number of views. This has almost 1 million views, and this one 324,000 views just in the last year. So obviously most of you already know that. But for those of you who don't, this is in no way all-encompassing. There's so much more evidence than this. But here's a couple videos right here that if you just type them in and search them out and watch them, they'll give you a good primer to help you understand what we're talking about here. That area is not even the right area, and that Wailing Wall is not even part of the temple, never was. So please don't be deceived by their theatrics and their scripts and all of that they've set up. No, they did not set up Israel over there in that desert so that all of them and all their wealthy friends could go over there and live. No, that's the new ghetto for the Jews. It was set up so that the Jews would voluntarily migrate there and they could get them all into one place. So for all of you people who are hating on Israel and thinking, oh, Netanyahu and all those people living over there in Israel, they're the bad guys. No, you've been completely duped, exactly like the Germans in Nazi Germany, completely duped by the propaganda to turn on the Jews. No, our enemy are not those people over there. We have the same enemy as those people over there. The same people who have moved them into that concentration camp are trying to move us into our own concentration camps over here, which they call sustainable cities. But anyway, this is the step that they're trying to sell us right now. And all the loopy leftists are like, yeah, they're going to save the world. I can hardly wait till I get my virtual reality chip right in my brain. But anyway, that's part of the agenda too, that they want to build this high-speed railway and all of this, and they need this area cleared. So they're relocating people by force. And we've seen the same types of things with the weather wars on this coast using hurricanes. Another interesting thing about Paradise, and here in the same area, Helltown, I've noticed that there are places like that all across the United States. There seem to be several hell towns. I mean, who names their town Helltown? And who thinks, hey, that sounds like a nice place to move and raise my family in Helltown? And when I looked into several of these places named Helltown, they were named just for that. It wasn't a coincidence or just a misunderstanding or anything like that. No, they were named that because of all of the strange occurrences that happened there. And that was something I noticed when I was going through David Pallady's missing 411 case files, was that several of the national parks where these things happened, they happened at, like, for example, one happened at Devil's Head, Colorado, in Pikes National Forest. Another one happened at Devil's Peak in Los Angeles County. And of course, we see that everywhere with the Devil's Triangle and all of that. Even NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, Jack Parsons, remember the occultist, the Satanist that was roommates with L. Ron Hubbard, another cult leader? They were disciples of Crowley from overseas here in America. Well, remember, they went and did that ritual at that place called, what was it called? Devil's Head Gateway. Well, I'll go more into that in just a minute because I want to show you some more connections to that. But anyway, the point is that it's not a coincidence that these strange missing person cases from these missing 411 books, a lot of them happen at places called Devil's Head, Devil's Triangle, Devil's Peak, and the Paradise Fires were right next to Helltown, because these places are aptly named just because of that kind of activity. Helltown, Ohio is the perfect example because it's been on a ton of ghost shows and all of that because it has all of these urban legends about what? Murderous Satanists being seen in the woods. Children being held in the abandoned buildings and in abandoned buses in the woods. Things like that, which they say, oh, it's just, oh, you know how it is, urban legends, it's Crybaby Creek or whatever. But get this. In 1974, President Gerald Ford approved legislation that allowed the National Park Service the power to expropriate land, theoretically to preserve forests. So this was one of the very first places that they came in after he passed that bill that they could take this land. And they bought up all the houses and ran everybody out of town. So I wanted to mention that because I think a lot of people assume that we just always had national forests, that there's been parts of the United States that have always been preserves and people weren't allowed to build there or anything, but that's not the case at all. These national forests were established fairly recently. And it's not that these cryptids or mysterious remnant species moved in there because they were isolated and there weren't any people there. It seems to be the opposite, that these mysterious Devil's Triangle sort of events go back as far as you can research, predating the national parks. And at some point, the government went into these mysterious places and started clearing them. and said, people can't live here now. And of course, we know that not every scary story and legend is true, that once these areas get a name for all of the creepy things going on, then people start wanting to visit and making up stories of their own and all this. So I'm not saying that every single teenager's scary story of the area is true, but in light of the interviews given by all of these SRA victims and abductees, people who were abducted as children and used in these child trafficking rings, and there's a lot of stuff in Helltown that sounds very much like what they report. Like, here's one story about the Catholic Church and satanic sacrifices that were going on in the basement of the church. And now it says, as with any town, churches are a strong source of creepy legends. There are 2 churches within Helltown, Boston Community Church and Mother of Sorrows. Some say there is an evil man in the basement who prevents people from entering the church and won't let people see his face. Others say that devil worshippers own the church and there are candles burning at all hours. And as far as I can trace it, many of those legends started from stories of people after the town was abandoned. And people reported when they went through there that they would see somebody in the basement burning candles, and they would see children's faces peeking out of the window. And this man in the basement that several people saw, when he saw people, he would always duck away behind the window, that he didn't want anybody to see his face. And then they covered the windows, and it was, there were lots of reports like that, which not only lines up with all the stories about things going on underneath these Catholic churches and stuff, but it also lines up with the actual court testimony given by these trafficked children in Omaha, Nebraska during the Franklin cover-up. Those children testified in court that they would abduct children, namely Johnny Gosh was one, say in Iowa, and then they would traffic them across several states. And as they did that, there was a network of abandoned barns and abandoned buildings where they would keep the children. So I'm not saying I can prove 100% that this Helltown legend is true, but it wouldn't be beyond the stretch of imagination to think that maybe some of these tales are based on things people actually saw out there. It was also nicknamed Mutant Town because they said they saw all of these hybrid creatures in the woods, humanoid deformed creatures. So what do they say? They say, oh, no, that's a play on words. It used to be Mutane Town because the legend was there was a chemical spill that caused people to, be deformed. No, that's not what people report. They report seeing deformed humanoid hybrids in that woods. That's why it was called Mutant Town and Helltown and all of that. And then the government came in and bought it up. In fact, sometimes it takes a tremendous amount of research, and you have to go all the way back in world history to ancient times to find out which came first, the chicken or the egg. Because a lot of ththese places, like the Devil's Gate Dam out in California, people are saying, oh, well, that comes from Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons, the Satanist who worked for NASA, JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He was an open Satanist and a member of the OTO, and he ran a cult out in California. You can even get on YouTube and search up him chanting. He would do these incantations when they would do the rocket propulsion tests. And they have it all on tape from the recorded tests. And he sits there and he summons Satan and summons all these demons for help and stuff. But anyway, L. Ron Hubbard, right here, pictured with him, was one of his roommates. So again, all this stuff is always connected. Here's NASA, Jack Parsons, and L. Ron Hubbard, who founded the cult of Scientology. But the story goes, the official narrative goes, that Jack Parsons just put an ad out in the paper asking for roommates. And he opened his house up and invited a whole bunch of eccentric people to come and live with him. And they had these giant orgies and did all this sex magic and all of that. It's all a matter of public record. Everybody knows about it. If you're interested in more on that, you can just go read the FBI interviews. Like here's page 11 where he admits to all of that. And on page 16 of the FBI interview, they state, quote, Parsons' home, as of that time, 1946, served as a headquarters for a religious cult in Pasadena. On page 19 of the FBI interview, it says, quote, a religious cult believed to advocate sexual perversion was organized at the subject's home at 1003 South Orange Grove Avenue, Pasadena, California, blah, blah, blah. But like I said, it's a matter of public record. This isn't a conspiracy theory. He was in a cult, more like the head of a cult, and he was under Aleister Crowley. So he was a branch in the United States of a cult from Europe. And of course, it was a sex cult. If you've watched my Age of Deceit series that I just put up over the last couple of months, there's 8 videos on that. And then the Black Awakening was another 4 videos. And it talks all about this sex magic. They were big into homosexuality, right? And the sex magic. And, oh, he was going to bear the Antichrist, sort of a Rosemary's Baby type thing going on in there. But anyway, for the purposes of this video, what I'm talking about is this Devil's Gate. They say that it got its name because Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard and their cult members did this ritual to open a portal that Aleister Crowley had begun talking about, that his little alien-looking guy used to come through and talk to him. These are the images of that entity that Crowley called Lamb, that used to come through, one of his spirit guides, and you can see it looks like sort of what we would call these aliens nowadays. Of course, we know it's all demonic. They're just demons. It used to be monsters and demons in the old text. Now we call them quote unquote aliens and cryptids and all of that, but they're still monsters. So anyway, this idea of this portal to let these things through like Lamb came from Crowley, but Parsons and Hubbard did this ritual out in California, supposedly to open a portal to let the demons through, and that's at Devil's Gate Dam. So a lot of people mistakenly think that it's called Devil's Gate and all of these weird paranormal things happen around there because of Jack Parsons, and that they did open some sort of interdimensional rift, a demonic portal. But if you actually research it, you'll find out that it was known to be a Devil's Gate long before Jack Parsons was ever born. So it's closer to the truth to say that they chose that site because it already was linked to these strange disappearances and phenomena, the same way we see with the megaliths that are built all around the world on these ley lines, that there appears to already be a grid of these quote-unquote sacred sites or energetic intersections where this demonic activity happens. Like this article explains, but long before then, long before Parsons showed up, they could see the devil's face right there in the rock side. So much so that tribe members were apparently forbidden from straying too close to the horned visage. And you can see here on old postcards, I mean, look at the era of the cars. And now this has been washed off, and they've used excavating equipment to change the face, the rock face. But there was a horned, you can see the horns, the ears, the face. So back then, a century ago, and going all the way back, people could obviously see that this was a devil's face. This was some sort of demonic face in the rock side. And if you don't know about that, you definitely need to go back and research that. Here, the video I did, the biggest secret hidden in plain sight, the rocks were alive. That's a must-see. If you don't understand that these faces and these entities that we see as mountains and all over our landscape, you can see these giants, they're everywhere, that you really need to go back and watch that video if you're not aware of that. Because if you can't come to terms with some of that very basic foundational knowledge about where you are, I mean, you just simply, you don't know where you are. You really do not yet know what world you're living in, because there's a lot more than just petrified dinosaur bones from the first Earth Age. What we now just call rock and just assume it's just always been rock is the end result of petrification, mineralization. It's a process, petrification. It turns organic things into rock. Literally, petrification is real. This is science. So it's not just the devil's face out there in California at the dam. We see these all over. They're usually even called the sleeping giant or the sleeping goddess or whatever on all these different continents. And there's been a lot of erosion, but you can still see. So the records left by all of our ancestors from the first Earth Age are true. They're true. We consider them mythology because we're so self-absorbed that we subjugate all of world history to right now, what's going on in modern times. But if you can pry your mind open a little bit, you'll be able to just look around you and see. Also, the mineral kingdom is an actual kingdom. There's the celestial kingdom, that's what we call the heavenly frequency dimensions. Then we have the animal kingdom, which is lower. Then we have the plant kingdom. Then we have the mineral kingdom, which is the lowest frequency. In fact, some people consider it flatlined. They consider it dead, but it's the ground. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the underworld. There's not just all of this physical activity going on beneath the ground, inside what we call the ground, that can be perceived in our 3 dimensions with humans working with these Nephilim hybrids and all of that stuff. In that idea of hell, like a cavernous inside the ground underworld, but there's actually a lower dimension that can only be perceived if your brainwaves change, if you go into an altered state of consciousness, which is what happens, you know, whether it's astral projection or like I showed earlier with the out-of-body experiences. I had an out-of-body hell experience back when I was 17 years old. It's on my channel. So these things are very real, and you can, if God allows you, gives you a vision or whatever, allows you to perceive in that altered state of consciousness, there's other things going on in the underworld as well, meaning the underworld being that frequency range, being that dimension. And it's all layered one on top of the other. We share space. It's not like out there somewhere in a bubble detached from us. It's layered one on top of the other, like a rainbow, you know, like a prism. When the white light goes in and it breaks it into, you know, 6 to 8 different colors, different frequency ranges, frequencies of light, but it's really all together. It's really all one thing. It's not like, oh, the red dimension, the hell dimension, or the infrared dimensions are out here in a bubble, like Michio Kaku talks about. It's a different universe. No, it's not. It's all a universe, one word. The word of God is Jesus Christ. It's one word. It's one whole, holy. When it's whole, it's holy. It's one frequency, but it can be split up into many dimensions if you want to perceive it that way. So there are ultraviolet. Ultraviolet would be above the highest frequency that's invisible to our human eye, and that would be the heavenly dimensions. They're moving very fast, and that's why they're invisible to us. And then we have the lower dimensions and the infrared dimensions. That's why creatures that overlap in those dimensions, like bats, they can see infrared. Anyway, we're not all existing in the same subset of dimensions, but we are all overlaid and sharing space. And we can perceive some of the entities, like we see in the animal kingdom, all these different animals, but they're not all exactly in our same subset of dimensions. Like say a dog can hear frequencies, higher frequencies that we can't. So they're perceiving other dimensions also, in addition to the ones that we share with them. Dolphins are high frequency. And like I mentioned, bats are infrared. So they're a lower frequency entity, but we all, you know, overlap in different ways. And that's why we all see the world differently. And, you know, that accounts a little bit for the Mandela effect, too. That's not all of what's going on, but we know that energy is always in motion. So you're either going up or you're going down. And that's exactly what the Bible says, that there is a separation taking place. Some souls are going up, which people call everything from ascension to rapture to, you know, whatever the terminology. And there are some people who are going down, which is what the Bible calls God giving them up to a depraved mind. And they begin to spiral down. They go into a downward spiral, which we call hell. And that's why, as many of you know, I always say rise and shine. I mean that literally. You are either rising or you are falling. That's the separation. There are souls being raised, and there are fallen angels. It's not just religion, it's simple science, the positive and negative poles, like on a battery. The separation is either you're rising to the positive pole, Christ, or you're magnetically being drawn downward. You're falling to the negative pole, which is Antichrist. Christ and Antichrist, God and Satan. Energy is always in motion. You are either rising or you are falling. So we might perceive that from a sort of self-centered perspective, that the dimensions are moving or that we're shifting timelines or reality. But it's probably just closer to the objective truth to say that we're in motion, we're energy in motion, and we're moving up or we're moving down. And in that process, we are changing and merging dimensions. And like I've talked about ad nauseum in a lot of my interdimensional videos and pieced into other videos where it's pertinent, that Kepler's model of the universe is pretty much accurate, except he has the sun in the center, when in fact it's geocentric. And when I say Earth, I don't just mean the land mass, the solid part. I think a lot of people oversimplify that and they're just talking about dirt. But when I say Earth, I mean its atmosphere also, because there is a lot more to the Earth. It's much larger, but it's just not visible. It's not solid to us in this dimension. But it's very real. Gases are just as real as solids atomically. So for example, if you take a piece of paper, something that's solid in our dimension, and you burn it, then it turns into a gas. It doesn't just disappear. The chemical process of burning changes that solid into a gas. The atoms still exist, but they're invisible to us after it's burned. It's no longer solid. It's in the atmosphere invisibly, but the atoms are still there. They never cease to exist. So that's what was going on with all of the burnt offerings. So as magical, air quotes implied, as it seems, you can literally send matter into the next dimension, into another frequency realm by the things we do in this dimension. They're all overlaid. So it's butterfly effect. You're always affecting all of the other dimensions. Just like the Bible says in all those verses, whatever you bind on earth is bound in heaven, whatever you loose on earth is loosed in heaven, that we do have an effect on the other dimensions. And that's what all the occultists and the black magic people are practicing. They still do these things, burnt offerings and all of that. They are transmuting energy from one dimension to another. And their mystery schools have a remembrance of these, they call it alchemy. You can go back through all of the occult science books and it talks about alchemy repeatedly, how you can transmute matter and you can essentially erase things from this dimension and release that energy into other dimensions. And that's exactly what the Bible says will happen after all of this transpired. This realm, this earth, what we call earth, it says will melt with fervent heat. And then it says, then I saw a new heaven and new earth, because the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. And there are Bible verses that literally say we will see the new earth coming down out of heaven. That's a frequency range. So it's important to understand nothing is lost. Nothing will be lost. Anything that is lost in this realm is retrieved and redeemed by Christ into heaven. So it's a tangible place. We're talking about a tangible place. And actually, there's one dreamer vision that I heard a guy testify of years and years ago that really made me think of this concept. He said it was a tribulation dream, and a nuclear bomb had gone off in a major city close to where he lived. And he was on the outskirts of the city, so he tried to outrun it. And he talks about this wall of fire coming at him. And as it swept over him, he said he didn't feel a thing because he was obviously instantly incinerated. But he described from his perception was when the wall of fire came over him, everything behind the wall of fire was beautiful and green and gorgeous. So he had obviously changed frequencies. He had obviously died in this event and was instantly in the other frequency dimension. So it was still Earth, but it was the new Earth. The things that had been burned up were transmuted. They were in the next dimension. They weren't gone. So I know these are strange things to talk about, and everybody is not into quantum physics and all of that, and I understand that. But I guess the point I'm trying to get across is that the Earth is bigger. That just because parts of it are considered atmosphere or invisible air and things like that. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a really interesting video on what are clouds really. Some of you know I mentioned it a few months back. I really want to get it out, but I have to go through this stuff step by step. So anyway, gases that are stacked naturally above what we call the solid ground are also part of the Earth. And above the solid ground, you know, we have our atmosphere that is stacked. You know, we have the troposphere, the stratosphere, the mesosphere, the thermosphere, the exosphere. So it continues going outward. It's infinitely large, and it is self-organized by density and buoyancy. The atomic weight, the electromagnetism, all of that causes the layers of the atmosphere to self-organize. I mean, it's not rocket science, pun intended, because it's not gravity. There's no such thing as gravity. That's why all of their equations trying to prove gravity are chaos. They're like making up imaginary numbers and everything, trying to force a square peg in a round hole, and they still can't prove it because there's no such thing as gravity. That's ridiculous. It's buoyancy and density. And so that's how the kingdoms are stacked. The mineral kingdom, plant kingdom, animal kingdom, and even the celestial kingdoms that we perceive from our lower subset of 3 to 5 dimensions as things sort of floating in the sky. But that's the celestial kingdom, and those entities are alive. But the same with the mineral kingdom. I don't believe it's flatlined. It says in the Bible that there are living stones. So, but they're heavy. It's the density. That's what makes them the landmass part of the Earth. And then we're tethered to the Earth by our density, by our electromagnetism, because of the way things stack. And this is just physically. I'm just speaking about the physical representation, the manifestation that we perceive physically. But it also corresponds precisely with frequency. The higher frequencies really are up. They are lighter. That's why we have these interchangeable words like light. Light means light like a feather. It floats, it's light. But it means light, like the white light of God. The Most High will scientifically be the Most High. It's real. And the lowlifes really will descend into the bowels of hell. It's a fact. This is scientific. And that really is in the bowels of the Earth, not limited to the dimensions of the Earth that we perceive. But if you're talking about atoms, matter, quantum physics, there absolutely is a place called hell, Sheol. Here's a zillion verses that talk about it. Look up Strong's Word 7585. Or Strong's Word 1067. I mean, that'll give you several examples, just limitless examples. But the gist of the idea is that there is a dimension that probably, if I had to guess, in our perception of this subset of dimensions, we would perceive as, say, lava inside the Earth that would correlate with this lake of fire. And like I said, you can burn a piece of paper, the solid of it, down to where it's invisible to us, and yet those atoms still exist. So when it says that you're eternally burning in this lake of fire, that you're going to be somewhere eternally. Energy never ceases to exist. It just changes forms. That's the laws of thermodynamics. We know that. So if you choose not to go to heaven, if you choose to reject Christ and love sin and love the things of hell, and that's where you want to go, you need to be warned. You're not going to be able to die. The Bible verses says they will beg for death and death will flee from them, because you are eternally going to be somewhere. And personally, it's beyond my imagination why anybody would take any chance biologically, scientifically, religiously in ending up having their soul, their energy end up in a place that spirals down to the point of eternal fire, being consumed by fire eternally and yet never perishing. A place that is just as solid there when you're resonating in that frequency. Like I told you guys about my out-of-body experience, my visit to hell back when I was 17 years old. It was physical. Those things there grabbed my arm. They weren't ghosts. Not when you're in that dimension. They might be apparition like, etheric, atmospheric, sort of entities from our perception in these dimensions. But when you're resonating in the same frequency they are just as solid and tangible as anything solid and tangible in this world to us. I know they've built these slides, these blocks into our mind, and they've told us it's science versus religion, but they are not mutually exclusive. In fact, science proves religion. The problem is that the Holy Scriptures were so far ahead of where we were scientifically that we couldn't understand them. But we're here now, and science is catching up to the Holy Bible. And the quantum physicists are discovering that other dimensions, quote unquote, spiritual realms, are absolutely real. And there is a natural process of separation. And if you go back to word origins, you'll see that they understood that. They weren't dumb monkeys that we came from. No, we're the fallen. We're the dumbed down version. They knew. That's why words like bright meant intelligence, the highest intelligence. Oh, you're bright. Or you're dense. Dense means not very intelligent. It's about density. It's about atomic weight. It's about buoyancy. And they knew that. That's why those words were interchangeable. It's light. You're bright, you're dense, and the highest intelligence is the brightest light. It's the white light. It's the whole light. The white is the whole before it goes through the prism and is broken up. It's the white light. It's the supreme being. So all of you atheists out there who think you have some sort of intellectual high ground by talking about an invisible spaghetti monster in the sky, you're being foolish. That's silliness. You're being unscientific and closed-minded and dense. And I think that's why it was so profound when Einstein brought forth E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, because it is so simple. It's so simple that it's profound. Because this is what most physicists expect, a bunch of imaginary stuff. Chaos that never works out, a standard model that never works out. They just can never come to the answer when it's this simple. And it goes out like that through the dimensions. That's why we see in Kepler's model all of the geometric shapes as the dimensions go out. And Kepler's math never worked out either because he couldn't admit to geocentric. But when you can break free of those flawed foundations, then you can see the dimensions go out very simply. It's like E equals the mc squared, E equals mc cubed, E equals mc to the fourth power. And I'm not sure, I'm still working on these equations. I've been working on them for years. But when God first told me this, that it's this simple, the dimensional barriers, I myself couldn't imagine geocentric. I mean, back 20 years ago, nobody was talking about anything like that. So I was stuck in that flawed mindset, that flawed foundation. But anyway, and so I'm not sure. I wish I had a physicist friend to talk about this stuff with. So I'm not sure if God was saying that it's E equals mc squared, all of that, put all of that in a bracket and then square that, or cube that to get to the next dimension, or if it's just the speed of light that is squared, cubed to the fourth power, fifth power to go up a dimension, each frequency dimension. So, but anyway, the point of it is that it's the power, it's exponentially. It's about the speed of the exponent of the speed of light. It's that simple. And if you do a word study, the actual word study, go back to the actual characters that these ancient scripts were written in, you'll see that we've oversimplified the Bible in a lot of ways. And it talks about this exponential, interdimensional physics. So for example, there's a lot of times that it's talking about perception from the higher dimensions, from the heavenly realms, and it will say those words will actually mean to the something power. For example, take this verse. There's several verses in the Bible where it talks about the creatures in heaven, in the higher dimensions, singing, holy, holy, holy. And that word actually would translate not holy 3 times, but holy to the 3rd power. Or it'll say in the Bible, holy, 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 9 times. So they translated that these creatures were saying holy 9 times. But the actual ancient texts say that they were saying holy to the 9th power. So they were talking interdimensionally, which it's the same with the creatures. The creatures around the throne have eyes all over them and within. And that's speaking about these corporate entities, just like they would talk about the body of Christ is comprised of all of us. And we all have eyes, and we're all perceiving the realities and the dimensions in different ways. So the body of Christ is perceiving all of these things in all of these different ways simultaneously. So that's what, when it talks about these creatures around the throne with eyes all around and within, it's not some grotesque, sci-fi monster type thing. No, it's talking about the living creatures that expand throughout all dimensions. And that's what the Bible says. Even though we've simplified it down, dumbed it down to our low human understanding, to the point that it almost doesn't make sense sometimes. But the more we grow up and the more technology and wisdom and knowledge that we gain, we're starting to understand. Now, using this same model mathematically, you can see this is exactly accurate. And each of these domes or firmaments or Van Allen belts or whatever you want to call them, each of these dimensions that I've also juxtaposed against a pebble dropped in the water, how the frequency rings go out and out, it's like that. And it is both material and interdimensional, which is why we have all of those weird stories like in Antarctica where the pilots fly out and they report flying into another dimension, almost like the Bermuda Triangle, and disappearing. So it's more than just materialism. It's more than just 3-dimensional. So I know it's hard to reconcile all of that when we say things like the underworld or hell, that it can be a physical place in 3D, in 3 of the dimensions, a 3-dimensional place, but it can also be a dimension. And that's why we have the same words in our language for up. When you go up, you actually physically go up, but you actually are going up in frequency, but it corresponds materialistically with up. And the same way with down, our word in our language for down. When we say hell, we're talking about going down in frequency, a different dimension, but we're also talking about going down, physically down. They correspond because we're layered on top of each other. So it's both. Up is up and down is down. Yet depending on how holistic your perception is, you might perceive that as 2 separate things, but it's all the same thing. That's why some people religiously think that going up to heaven is like going up in the sky. Like you're going to go up in a sky and there's a throne above the firmament. Like it's literally physically like their mind is trapped in 3D. Like they're thinking up, you're going to go up. And they're not wrong because up is up. But in reality, it's more than that as well. It'll be going up in frequency. So people left behind, we will actually be invisible to them because we will be in a different dimension. And vice versa. People going to hell will literally be going down, like down into the bowels of the earth, but they will also be going down in frequency to an infrared frequency dimension. And that's the concept I was trying to convey in part 2 when I made the correlation that it's the same thing when we hear people talk about going to these underground bases and seeing humans in cages, and my labs reporting reptilians and these hybrid looking monsters. Or if we hear religious people like Bill Weiss with his book 23 Minutes in Hell, where he talks about being snatched out of his body and taken down into hell, where he was thrown into a cage and severely tortured incessantly by these reptilian demons. It's the same thing, many layers of the same thing. Whether it's Bill Weiss saying he was snatched out of his body and taken to hell, or whether it's Donald Marshall saying during REM sleep he's snatched out of his body and taken to these underground quote-unquote cloning centers where disgusting demons and the most evil people dwell and enjoy torture. I mean, that's hell. It's everybody saying the same thing and seeing multiple dimensions of the very same thing. And that's a really huge problem in society, and especially in the truth community and in the New Age movement. They don't want to admit that hell exists. They don't want to believe in the inversion. The backwards, upside down, as above, so below, integration versus disintegration, creation versus destruction. But there is an inversion. That's why these prisms, if you put them together, they make the Star of David. You know what? I get tired of that too. Everybody thinks that the devil owns geometry. Hey, you know what? Satan's not more powerful than God. Newsflash. God created geometry, and we can discuss these shapes and mathematics. I get that so much with people. You can't say anything anymore because the Illuminati has indeed corrupted everything. But just because they've taken the rainbow and decided that that's a symbol for pride or a symbol for perversion, they didn't create the rainbow. God gave us the rainbow. The Bible says the rainbow is our symbol of the promise. So every time my little boy colors a rainbow and I put it on the refrigerator, that doesn't mean that I want to go partake in sexual perversion. They don't get the rainbow. They don't get to take the beauty out of life. The same way with butterflies. I love butterflies. I go out to the woods line, I sprinkle wildflowers so the butterflies can come in and I can see how beautiful they are in the summer. Just because the Illuminati chose monarch butterflies as a symbol for their programming doesn't mean they get the beauty of God's creation. So please don't fall prey to that, people. God gave us all of these beautiful things. Just because the Illuminati chooses to see them as ugly things and use them for ugly things doesn't mean that they get to take beauty from us. We can still see the beauty in the world. So if you've become so obsessed with this information that we talk about here, that all you see in the world is ugliness, that when you look at a beautiful butterfly that God created, all you see is ugly. When you look at a gorgeous rainbow in the sky, all you see is ugly, then you need to check yourself and you need to take that lens off. It's possible to be wise and also not lose the Holy Spirit, the lens that allows you to see things as beautiful, the lens that allows you to see through the eyes of love. I just wanted to throw that in because so many people who I love, brothers and sisters who I love, who are on the trail of truth and they're doing it with the most wonderful intentions and all of that, have begun to let the devil make them see through his eyes instead of through the eyes of God. So I can go back to old videos that I did where I'll just have a beautiful necklace on that has like a butterfly, a turquoise butterfly, something I think is beautiful. And I'll get a whole bunch of comments. Oh, that's a butterfly. You know, you got a butterfly. It's a monarch program, you know? And it's like, no, I'm not going to censor my reality and just destroy everything beautiful that God put in the world just because some creeps in a crime syndicate use it for something ugly. And we all need to do the same. It's a slippery slope to slip into paranoia and to start being cynical and all of that. So we need to guard against that too. But I digress. My point was that there are higher dimensions. Heaven is absolutely real, but there are lower dimensions as well. Hell is real. And that's one of the biggest deceptions of the devil, is to convince people that there isn't any hell. And I just felt compelled to really touch on that today, because with this hyper grace movement, there seems to be this belief, and it's been around for a while, that there is a heaven because people want to believe that, but there's not a hell because they don't want to believe that. And here's a video that I put up, I don't know, 10, 11 years ago. Here it is, December of 2008, with a sidewalk survey showing several of these people. And this is very common. They just don't believe there could be a hell, right? A loving God wouldn't actually have a hell. So they're willing to believe half of the truth, but the uncomfortable parts, they don't want to believe.
I don't believe there's a hell. I do believe there's a heaven. Somehow there has to be more to this existence than just, your short period of time on the earth. It's got to be something following it.
I do believe there is a heaven, definitely a heaven. I'm not sure so much about the hell, how you explain hell. However, yes, heaven, yes.
I don't think it's necessary that you attend church to go to heaven, or that you believe in the Bible but just live a good life. I think hell is reserved for just a few really bad people, maybe somebody who might commit murder intentionally. Probably murder is about the only thing I would think you would probably end up in hell for.
I'm not really sure what would define you to go to hell, or why you would go to heaven. I really wouldn't know.
I think there's probably not either a heaven or hell, just an afterlife. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think I'm not sure what there is, but I think there's just sort of a middle, like a limbo or a purgatory where everybody goes. That's neither really comfortable or really traumatic.
I believe that everybody, number one, in their own mind thinks of a heaven and hell, and heaven is what makes them the happiest, what they're looking forward to in the future, and what they strongly believe by their belief, whether it be God or some other deity or some other entity, that heaven does exist, and that's what they work for in life. My daughter is a proclaimed atheist, but somewhere in the back of her mind, she knows that there is, in her mind, what she wants out of the final lifetime. And to me, that is all it requires. A deity is not required.
I believe in my kind of belief, which is more of a metaphysical belief. I believe how you feel on earth and how you view heaven, what it is, it's your own conception. So it becomes that way when you die. So if you believe that there's a God source in you and that you're basically a good person and you're a happy person, that's what happens to you after you go. But I don't believe that you're penalized and that you go to some place full of fire if you didn't live your life the way organized religion thinks you should.
And all of these types of thoughts and philosophies are so common in human societies. They're completely ignorant to reality. But being in denial of reality and celestial mechanics and science and the spiritual, other dimensional realities isn't going to stop them from existing. You can go out and stand on a 60-story building and say, well, I don't believe in buoyancy and density. I think I'm going to jump off this 60-story building and I'm going to float. But I guarantee the minute you step off the edge, you're going to believe, because the sidewalk's coming. And likewise, believing you're just going to float up to heaven because you're a good person isn't going to stop hell from coming. It's coming. They are already building it all around us. The slave cities, the work camps, the 5G networks, the mind control, the neural implants. It's already here. We already live in a soft tyranny, in a high-tech slave trade, in a labor force, if you will, as human resources. But it's about to get a lot worse. Everybody who's looking forward to making America great again, you know what? Things are going to be great. The millennial reign of Christ is coming. Freedom is coming. But they're not going to lay down and give it up without a fight. You have to realize that. They have spent generations building this thing to externalize their hierarchy, to bring hell on earth. If you think one politician is going to walk into one political office and change what they have been setting up interdimensionally for thousands of years? You need to adjust your thinking. Yes, this thing is coming down. The veil is lifting. All things are being brought to light. These people will be exposed, but it's going to come with great tribulation. Great tribulation. We've seen what happened to President Lincoln when he tried to free slaves. We've seen what happened to JFK when he started talking about the crime syndicates. And I'm not saying that's going to happen to Donald Trump. I'm not even saying Donald Trump is legit or is not legit. This isn't a political commentary. What I'm saying is that God is going to bring these things to light. And as they start to be exposed and their house of cards starts to crumble, they're going to fight. They're going to fight to maintain it. And World War III is coming. It's coming. And even above the humans, those demons who are above the godfathers, who are above the leaders of the governments, above the tyrannical fascists, those demons who are absolutely present, working with these people to bring about hell on earth, they will burn it down to try and stop the souls from getting out. That's the warning. That's the message. They want to trap souls in hell. That's what they want. They're not losing anything by burning it down. They want to bring it down, 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 and they want to capture us in it. So please don't be deceived. Please don't be deceived into thinking hell isn't real and hell isn't coming. You are going to need a savior. You're not going to be able to get out of this one on your own. Reincarnation isn't going to save you from this. Who would want to be reincarnated in hell? Oh, so you die and you're born again as a prison slave being tortured nonstop until you're tortured to death, and then you're born right back into hell again. Who, what? How is that an answer? That's still eternal hell. But there is a way out, up. You have to go up. You're not going to evacuate this fire by going down. You need to go up. And there's only one way to go up in frequency, and that's receive the Holy Spirit. Receive the upgrade. The Holy Spirit. God sent the Holy Spirit into the world just for this, to save us. Right here, John 3:16 through 18. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that everyone who believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Because this world is in entropy. You're not going to be able to stay here. There isn't going to be status quo here. You're either going up or you're going down. And it says this world that we're in right now, it's going down. And you are going to want to keep moving up. You're going to want to move into the new earth. Right here, whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe has already been condemned. Already, this world is in a state of entropy. It is in a state of disintegration. If you're here with us in this world, you've already been judged once, honey. And this world is already condemned. Not making a choice is a choice. You choose. Either you're going to be joined back to Christ, reintegrated, resurrected, redeemed out of this world in Christ, or you're not. There is only one interdimensional being powerful enough to defeat this age-old, demonic, satanic network of demons. And his name is Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach. Please be saved today. Please believe me. I know I'm not perfect and I'm clumsy in my speech and some of you don't like my voice. I know all of that, but hear my heart. Be saved today. I'm telling you the truth. I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I can testify he is real. And all gods are not equal. He is the Most High. He is the Son of the Holy Father. There is a supreme being. Please, he is the name above all names. I implore you, don't put your faith in the gods of this world and the lies they have told you and the doctrines of demons. that they have socially engineered our society with. Because if you choose to serve these fallen gods, then you have a part in their damnation. Choose life. Choose resurrection. Choose Christ. Joshua 24:15. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your ancestors beyond the Euphrates, the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.